Think about the last time you stood before an ancient painting or sculpture, maybe in a museum or even in a photograph. It's easy to admire the beauty, the craftsmanship, the sheer skill it took to create something so breathtaking centuries or even millennia ago. But what if I told you that many of these masterpieces hold secrets, that the artists who made them often wove hidden messages into their work, messages that were meant only for the keenest eyes, or perhaps for future generations like ours to uncover? These aren't just random markings or simple decorations. They are deliberate, carefully placed clues, sometimes symbols of rebellion, expressions of faith, records of astronomical events, or even personal signatures hidden in plain sight. And today, with the help of modern technology and dedicated researchers, we are finally beginning to decipher them. It's like stepping into the world's most fascinating treasure hunt, one that spans continents and cultures, from the grand temples of Egypt to the delicate scrolls of ancient China, from the mysterious caves of prehistoric Europe to the intricate mosaics of the Byzantine Empire. Each of these hidden messages tells a story, not just about the art itself, but about the people who created it, their beliefs, their struggles, their triumphs, and their deepest hopes and fears. They challenge everything we thought we knew about history, inviting us to look closer, to question, and to wonder. What were these artists trying to say? Why did they feel the need to conceal their truths? And what can these revelations teach us about our own place in the long, unfolding story of humanity? In this video, we're going to explore 30 of these extraordinary hidden messages found in ancient art from around the world. Together, we'll decode symbols that have puzzled historians for centuries, uncover narratives that have been waiting silently in stone and pigment, and piece together the whispers of the past that are only now rising to the surface. This isn't just a list of facts, it's an invitation to join a journey, to see history through new eyes, and to share in the thrill of discovery. So settle in, open your mind, and let's unravel the mysteries left behind by some of the most creative and cunning minds the world has ever known. Our journey begins not in a grand palace or a sun-drenched temple, but deep within the earth, in the cool, silent darkness of a cave in southwestern France. The Lascaux Cave is often called the Sistine Chapel of prehistory, a breathtaking gallery of animal paintings created over 17,000 years ago. For decades, visitors and scholars have marveled at the stunningly detailed renderings of bulls, horses, and stags that seem to gallop across the curved rock walls. But in a shaft at the very bottom of the cave, away from the main procession of animals, lies a panel that is utterly different, a scene so bizarre and out of place that it has fueled debate for generations. This is the scene of the so-called Birdman, and it is one of the most compelling hidden messages ever left by our ancient ancestors. At first glance, the composition is chaotic, even violent. A massive bison, its body taut and its entrails spilling onto the ground, appears to be charging. A rhinoceros stalks away on the left, seemingly indifferent to the drama. And lying in front of the bison is a stick-figure man with a bird's head, his body stretched out and apparently lifeless. What could this strange gathering possibly mean? For a long time, it was interpreted quite literally as a record of a hunting accident, a man killed by a wounded bison. But this simplistic explanation fails to answer so many questions. Why does the man have the head of a bird? Why is a rhinoceros, an animal not typically hunted, included in the scene? And most importantly, why would our Paleolithic ancestors choose to depict a simple, tragic accident in such a sacred, hidden space, a place that clearly held profound ceremonial significance? This is where the idea of a hidden message truly takes root. Many anthropologists and researchers of prehistoric religion now believe this panel is not a record of a physical event, but a spiritual one. They propose that this image is a detailed illustration of a shamanic trance, a visual story meant to be understood only by those initiated into the group's mystical practices. In this interpretation, the bird-headed figure is not a literal man with a bird's head, but a shaman in a state of transformation. In numerous indigenous cultures around the world, birds are seen as spirit messengers, creatures capable of flying between the earthly world and the spirit world. The bird head could symbolize the shaman's soul taking flight on its journey. The wounded bison, then, is not an aggressor but a powerful spirit ally, a source of immense power that the shaman must engage with even at great personal risk. The act of its disembowelment could represent a sacred sacrifice or the release of this spiritual energy. The shaman lies in a state of ecstatic death. His physical body collapsed while his consciousness travels to other realms to gain knowledge, seek healing, or commune with the spirits of the animals his people relied upon for survival. The distant rhinoceros, a creature often associated with primal strength and mystery in other cave art, might represent another powerful spirit presence or a guardian of the threshold between worlds. This single image, therefore, transforms from a snapshot of misfortune into a complex cosmological diagram. It was a hidden manual, a piece of esoteric knowledge painted by someone who had experienced these trance states and needed to document the journey for others who would follow. It was not meant for every member of the tribe, but for the select few who were trained to navigate these non-ordinary realities. The location of the painting, deep in a dark, difficult-to-reach shaft, supports this theory. Reaching it would have been a journey in itself, a metaphorical descent before the shaman could make his spiritual ascent. This wasn't public art, it was a secret, powerful message to the spirit world and to future shamans, a testament to a sophisticated spiritual belief system that flourished in the flickering torchlight of the Ice Age. From the shadowy, intuitive world of prehistoric caves, we now travel to a place of dazzling, deliberate opulence, the tomb of the boy King Tutankhamun. Discovered nearly a century ago, the treasures within his burial chamber are famous worldwide: the golden mask, the ornate thrones, the statues of gods. But beyond the glittering artifacts lies another, more subtle treasure, one painted directly onto the walls themselves. The hieroglyphs that cover every surface are far more than just a formal inscription. They are a masterclass in ancient wordplay, a hidden layer of meaning where the very writing system itself becomes a magical device to ensure the pharaoh's safe passage into eternity. Ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs are a complex mix of logograms, which represent whole words, and phonograms, which represent sounds. This system gave scribes a unique opportunity for creativity. They could construct a word or a name using standard phonetic signs, but they could also choose specific symbols that added a second, deeper layer of meaning. This practice, known as cryptographic writing, was especially prevalent in sacred spaces like royal tombs, where every symbol was believed to hold potent magical power. In Tutankhamun's burial chamber, this wasn't just decorative text, it was a functional, spiritual tool. Take, for instance, the name of the god Osiris, the ruler of the underworld whom the deceased pharaoh hoped to join. His name could be written in a standard way, but in Tutankhamun's tomb, scribes often wrote it using hieroglyphs that also spelled out the word for throne and the eye of the god Horus. This was a brilliant, multi-layered pun. By writing Osiris's name this way, they were simultaneously invoking his presence, his stable and eternal throne, and the healing, protective power of the Eye of Horus. It was a condensed prayer embedded directly into the wall, meant to actively assist the king. This clever encoding extends to Tutankhamun's own transformed identity in the afterlife. Upon his death, the pharaoh was believed to become one with Osiris, often referred to as Osiris, the King Tutankhamun. In the tomb's texts, this phrase is frequently written with the Osiris glyph, a figure wrapped like a mummy, holding the crook and flail, the symbols of kingship. This single composite glyph doesn't just state the pharaoh's new divine status, it visually manifests it. The written word becomes a reality, magically cementing his successful transformation from a mortal ruler into an immortal god. Perhaps the most fascinating hidden messages are those meant to provide active protection. Certain passages from the Amduat, a funerary text detailing the sun god's nightly journey through the underworld, are written with unusual and specific hieroglyphs. A dangerous serpent representing the god's enemy Apep might be depicted as severed or bound by ropes, a visual act of magic designed to neutralize the creature's threat before it could even manifest. The hieroglyphs themselves become a shield, their arrangement a form of supernatural defense for the vulnerable soul of the king navigating these perilous realms. This incredible attention to detail reveals a world where language and image were not separate from reality but were the very substance of it. To write something was to make it so. The scribes who painted these walls were not merely decorators, they were magicians and theologians, carefully selecting each sign to build multiple levels of assurance for their king's journey. They embedded puns, visual jokes, and powerful symbols into the very fabric of the text, creating a hidden dialogue with the gods that ensured Tutankhamun's name would not only be remembered but would actively live on, forever powerful and protected in the world to come. Leaving behind the coded hieroglyphs of Egypt, we venture across the Mediterranean to the brilliant and enigmatic Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. Here, in the labyrinthine ruins of their great palaces, another kind of hidden message was discovered not in text but in clay and faience. Among the most instantly recognizable artifacts from this culture are the mesmerizing figurines of the so-called Snake Goddess. Unearthed in the early 20th century, these statues depict a strikingly confident woman holding serpents in both hands, her bodice exposing her breasts and crowned with an elaborate, almost architectural headdress. At first, she seems to be a straightforward depiction of a deity or a priestess, but every element of her appearance is a potential symbol, a carefully chosen visual language that communicates a powerful and possibly secret doctrine about the nature of divine feminine power. Let's start with the most prominent feature, the snakes. Throughout the ancient world, serpents were potent and multifaceted symbols. They were associated with the earth, with renewal because of their ability to shed their skin, and with the underworld due to their habit of living in holes and crevices. For the Minoans, a society that lived with the constant threat of earthquakes, the serpent may have been seen as a creature deeply connected to the chthonic, the primal forces that could both create and destroy. By mastering these powerful creatures, holding them aloft with an expression of serene control, the goddess projects an authority over the natural and supernatural worlds. She doesn't fear the chaotic forces of the earth, she commands them. This could be a hidden message about the Minoan worldview itself, one where a powerful female principle was believed to be the best intermediary for managing the unpredictable, raw power of nature. Then there is the symbolism of her exposed breasts. In a modern context, this is often sensationalized, but in the ancient world, this was a clear and direct symbol of nurturing and fertility. However, it likely signifies a much deeper concept than just human reproduction. This is the fertility of the earth itself. As a goddess or a high priestess embodying the deity, she represents the source of all life, the nourisher of the people and the land. The message hidden in this depiction is one of abundance and sustenance, declaring that the divine feminine is the ultimate source of the community's survival and prosperity. It's a statement of power rooted in creation and care, a stark contrast to the more warlike male deities that would dominate later Greek mythology. Her towering headdress is no mere fashion statement. Its complex structure, often featuring layers and what appears to be a sitting animal, possibly a lion or a cat, signifies a high, perhaps even divine status. The headdress acts as a crown, immediately setting her apart from ordinary people and marking her as a vessel of immense spiritual authority. The animal perched on top adds another layer of encrypted meaning. If it is a lion, it connects her to symbols of royalty and untamed strength, further cementing her role as a sovereign ruler in the spiritual realm. This entire ensemble transforms the figure into a walking temple, a human-scale representation of the divine order. This brings us to the most compelling theory about these figurines. Were they encrypted messages in their own right? Some scholars propose that these statues were not mere representations of a goddess, but were actually precise ritual objects used by a powerful female priesthood. The figurine itself, with its specific combination of symbols, could have served as a three-dimensional guide or a doctrinal statement. A priestess holding such a figure during a ceremony would be physically manifesting the principles it represents: control over earthly forces, a connection to the underworld through the snakes, and the dispensation of fertile abundance. The hidden message was in the ritual performance itself, a code enacted for the benefit of the community to ensure protection and continuity. The possibility that these rituals involved communicating with the underworld through the serpent symbolism is particularly intriguing. The snakes, as creatures of the earth, were considered natural conduits to the realm of the dead and to chthonic deities. A priestess holding these snakes might have been performing a rite of divination, seeking answers from ancestors or earth spirits, or attempting to appease the forces that caused earthquakes. The serene expression on the figurine's face suggests this communication was not feared, but was a respected and controlled aspect of her religious duty. The hidden message here is one of profound connection, a belief that the veil between the world of the living and the world of the unseen was thin, and that women, through their symbolic mastery of the serpent, held the keys to crossing it. Moving from the symbolic power of the Minoan Snake Goddess, we journey to the equally sophisticated and coded world of ancient Mesopotamia, where some of the most compact and complex hidden messages were not painted on walls or cast in faience, but were instead carved into small, intricate cylinders of stone. To the untrained eye, a Mesopotamian cylinder seal might look like nothing more than a decorative item, a piece of administrative hardware used to roll an impression into wet clay to mark ownership or authenticate a document. But if you magnify these tiny scenes, a universe of meaning unfolds. Many of these seals are far more than bureaucratic stamps. They are minuscule cosmic maps, encoding advanced astronomical knowledge and celestial mythology into their design, a language of the stars meant for the eyes of a privileged few. The genius of this form of hidden message lies in its duality. On its surface, a seal might depict a classic mythological scene, a hero battling a beast, a presentation to a deity, or a ritual banquet. This was the public face of the message, a recognizable image that conveyed authority and cultural values, but embedded within these familiar tableaus are precise celestial symbols. A star-shaped rosette might not be just a decorative flourish, but the representation of the goddess Ishtar, who was personified by the planet Venus. A crescent moon could signify the moon god Sin, while a radiant sun disk often represented the sun god Shamash. The animals and mythical creatures so common in these scenes are now understood by many experts to be direct correlates to the constellations we still recognize today. The lion, the bull, and the scorpion weren't just powerful animals. They were Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio painted onto the celestial canvas. This is where the seals transform from simple art into sophisticated scientific instruments. Some scholars, like Dr. Marian Porsadou of the University of Helsinki, have conducted detailed analyses aligning the specific arrangements of symbols on certain seals with known astronomical events. One particularly compelling example is a seal that shows a crescent moon near a series of 7 dots. While this could be interpreted as a generic night sky, the specific configuration matches a rare and significant astronomical event, a close conjunction of the crescent moon with the Pleiades star cluster. In the Mesopotamian world, this specific alignment marked the beginning of the new year in their lunisolar calendar. The seal then becomes a permanent, portable record of this moment, a way to anchor time itself in a piece of stone. It was a hidden almanac, a way for the elite priestly class who controlled the calendar to verify and perpetuate their most important temporal cycles. Beyond mere timekeeping, these celestial maps served a deeper spiritual purpose. They were guides to a hidden layer of reality, the cosmic order that governed everything from the flooding of the rivers to the fate of kings. A scene of a king being introduced to a god by a priestess surrounded by celestial symbols isn't just a hopeful depiction of divine favor, it is a cosmological statement. It places the king's rule within the framework of the heavens, suggesting his authority is not just political, but is sanctioned and mirrored by the movements of the planets and stars. The seal's impression in clay would thus magically transfer this celestial endorsement to a mundane legal document or storage jar, infusing the everyday world with cosmic power. This knowledge was almost certainly restricted, a form of esoteric science reserved for the scribes, priests, and astronomers who made up the intellectual elite of Mesopotamian society. The ability to read the celestial code on a cylinder seal was a mark of high status and learning. It separated those who saw only a heroic myth from those who could read the alignment of planets, the passing of seasons, and the will of the gods in the very same image. In a society where astronomy and astrology were inseparable, these seals were tangible instruments of power. They allowed a small, educated class to predict celestial events, to claim divine insight, and to thereby maintain their authority over the entire population. The next time you see a photograph of one of these intricate seals, remember you're not looking at a simple piece of carved stone. You are looking at an entire ancient worldview, a hidden map of the universe, condensed into an object small enough to be held in the palm of your hand. Our exploration of ancient celestial codes now takes us high above the desert floor of southern Peru, to one of archaeology's most enduring and breathtaking mysteries. Etched across the vast, arid plains of the Nazca Desert are hundreds of immense geoglyphs lines, geometric shapes, and elaborate figures of animals and plants, some stretching over 200 meters across. From ground level, these markings are little more than shallow grooves in the reddish-brown earth, seemingly random and disconnected, but from the sky their true grandeur is revealed. For decades, the prevailing question was simply, why? Why would a people create such colossal artwork that they could never hope to see in its entirety? The answer, many researchers now believe, is not that the lines were meant for human eyes at all, but were instead a sophisticated language written on the earth itself, designed to communicate with the gods of the sky and the forces beneath the ground. The theory that the Nazca Lines functioned as a giant astronomical calendar is one of the most compelling. In the 1960s, astronomer and mathematician Maria Reich dedicated her life to studying the lines, meticulously mapping them, and proposing that many were precisely aligned with the cyclical movements of the sun, moon, and stars. She noted that certain long, arrow-straight lines pointed directly to the spot on the horizon where the sun would rise or set during the June and December solstices. These celestial events were not just markers of time for the Nazca. They were critical turning points in the agricultural year, signaling the arrival of water from distant mountain sources and the optimal times for planting and harvest. By creating permanent, landscape-sized markers for these events, the Nazca could predict and prepare for these vital seasonal changes with immense accuracy. A specific line, for instance, might only become active or significant on one single day of the year, when the first rays of the rising sun would blaze directly along its path, transforming it into a channel of light that connected the earth to the heavens. This connection goes beyond simple solstice markers. Some researchers have found alignments that correspond with the heliacal rising of certain bright stars and constellations, particularly the Pleiades star cluster. In the Andes, the appearance of the Pleiades before dawn in June was intimately linked to the coming rains and the fertility of the crops. A poor showing of the star cluster, often caused by atmospheric haze, was believed to forecast a poor harvest. By having geoglyphs that aligned with these specific celestial bodies, the Nazca may have been performing a form of ritual astronomy, using the lines as a giant observatory to monitor the stars and plead for their continued favor. The giant spider glyph, for example, is believed by some to be a representation of the constellation Orion, while the monkey with its intricately coiled tail may relate to the Big Dipper. These were not just pictures, they were mirrors of the sky on the earth, a way to harmonize their world with the cosmos above. But there is another, equally fascinating layer to this hidden message, one that looks down, not up. A more recent and groundbreaking theory proposes that the Nazca Lines are not just a map of the heavens, but also a map of the earth itself, specifically a chart of the vast and life-sustaining underground water sources that flow beneath the desert. Hydrogeologist David Johnson has suggested that the placement of the lines and figures directly correlates with the location of subterranean aquifers. The Nazca people, living in one of the most arid places on Earth, possessed an incredible, intimate knowledge of where to find water. They would have noticed subtle signs on the surface, specific rock distributions, changes in vegetation, perhaps even the behavior of animals, that indicated water flowing deep below. According to this theory, the geoglyphs were a sophisticated form of hydrological mapping. A trapezoid shape might mark the precise area above a large aquifer, while a long, straight line could indicate the direction of an underground water flow towards a well or a spring. The animal figures, often found at the starting points of these line systems, might represent specific clans or families who held the rights and the knowledge to access that particular water source. This transforms the lines from a purely ceremonial project into a vital, practical, and communal system for survival. The knowledge of how to read this map would have been incredibly powerful, held by a select few shamans or water priests. The lines themselves were the public monument, but their true meaning, the secret of the water, remained hidden in plain sight, a code understood only by the initiated. Whether as a celestial calendar, a hydrological map, or most likely a profound combination of both, the Nazca Lines stand as a monumental act of communication. They represent a civilization so in tune with its environment that it wrote messages to the gods in the language of the stars and whispered the secrets of the earth through vast drawings on the desert floor. The true genius of the Nazca was their understanding that the sacred and the practical were inseparable. Ensuring a water supply was a spiritual act, and tracking the stars was a matter of survival. Their hidden message was one of reciprocity, a plea to the heavens for rain, and a thank you to the earth for its hidden gifts, encoded on a canvas so large it could only be read by the deities it was meant to address. Shifting our focus from the vast geoglyphs of Peru to the intricate craftsmanship of ancient China, we encounter a world where hidden messages were not drawn on the earth but cast in bronze. During the Shang and Zhou dynasties, the most powerful and sacred objects were not crowns or swords, but elaborate bronze vessels used in rituals to honor ancestors and communicate with the divine. To the modern eye, these vessels are stunning works of art, covered in a dense, almost overwhelming array of patterns and creatures known as the Tauti mask. For a long time, Western scholars saw this style as purely decorative, a fantastic, abstract bestiary. But we now understand that this visual complexity was a deliberate screen, a way to encode deep Taoist and cosmological principles in plain sight, especially during periods of political upheaval and philosophical suppression. The most dominant motif is the Tauti, a symmetrical frontal face often composed of two confronting dragons or other beasts. It lacks a lower jaw, giving it a mysterious, consuming presence. This wasn't just a fearsome guardian image. Many experts believe it represents a primordial, all-encompassing force of nature. In early Taoist thought, the universe was a balance of chaotic, creative energies and structured, orderly principles. The Tauti, with its fragmented yet cohesive form, could be a visual expression of this cosmic duality, the raw, untamable power of the universe contained within a balanced, ritualized form. It served as a constant, hidden reminder that order and chaos are two sides of the same reality, a fundamental concept that would later be formally expressed as the interplay of yin and yang. Beyond the Tauti, the entire surface of a vessel becomes a cosmological map. Common animals like dragons, birds, and tigers are not randomly chosen. They are carefully placed symbols representing celestial directions, seasons, and elemental forces. A dragon might symbolize the east and the spring rains, while a tiger could embody the west and the harsh autumn winds. A vessel used in a ritual to a specific ancestor might feature a particular set of animals whose symbolic meanings aligned with that ancestor's perceived role or the family's lineage. The act of offering wine or food from such a vessel was thus not just a gesture of respect. It was a meticulously orchestrated ritual that used this encoded symbolism to align the human world with the cosmic order. The message was hidden in the iconography itself, a silent prayer for harmony between the realm of people and the forces of nature. Perhaps the most thrilling hidden messages are those that operate on a second, even more secretive level, disguised characters. Some scholars, through painstaking analysis, have proposed that the swirls of a dragon's body or the curves of a bird's tail are not merely decorative lines. They might be stylized, abstract forms of ancient Chinese characters. In a time of political strife, where new rulers might suppress the philosophies or historical records of a defeated dynasty, this would have been an incredibly cunning way to preserve knowledge. A noble family loyal to the old ways could commission a vessel that, to the untrained eye of a new imperial censor, displayed only approved traditional patterns. But to those who could read the code, the very bodies of the animals would spell out a character for justice or heaven, or perhaps even the name of a deposed king or a forbidden philosophical concept. This practice transforms the bronze vessel from a ritual object into a clandestine political statement. It became a durable, sacred repository of subversive ideas, hidden within the most visible and respected artifacts of the state. The message was safe because it was baked into the object's spiritual purpose. To destroy the vessel would be to commit sacrilege against the ancestors themselves. This dual layer of meaning, the public display of power and piety, and the private preservation of a contested identity or belief, reveals the incredible intellectual sophistication of these ancient artists. They were masters of symbolism, theologians, and political operatives all at once, using their skill to weave the deepest truths of their world into the very metal meant to last for eternity. Now we travel from the coded bronze of ancient China to the jungles of Mesoamerica, where an entire civilization built its identity around the precise movement of the stars and planets. The Maya were unparalleled astronomers and mathematicians, and they didn't just observe the cosmos, they integrated it into the very fabric of their cities. Their temples were not mere places of worship. They were colossal stone calendars, cosmic conduits designed to broadcast a powerful hidden message about the divine right of kings and the sacred order of time itself. Perhaps no structure exemplifies this more perfectly than the magnificent pyramid known as El Castillo at Chichen Itza. From a distance, El Castillo is a breathtaking geometric marvel, a stepped pyramid climbing towards the heavens. But as with so much in Mayan culture, its true purpose is revealed through alignment and mathematics. The pyramid is precisely oriented so that its 4 stairways, each with 91 steps, face the cardinal directions. This is our first clue to the hidden code. If you add the steps together 91 times 4, you get 364. Add the one final step at the top, the platform of the temple itself, and you arrive at 365, the exact number of days in the solar year. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a fundamental architectural statement. The pyramid was a physical manifestation of the solar cycle, a permanent, unmoving record of the year's passage that everyone in the plaza below could see and understand on one level. It grounded the community in the agricultural and ceremonial rhythm of the seasons. But the most spectacular hidden message is revealed only twice a year during the spring and autumn equinoxes. As the sun sets on these 2 days, a truly magical transformation occurs. The play of light and shadow on the northwest corner of the pyramid creates a series of triangular shapes that cascade down the balustrade of the main staircase. These interlocking shadows connect from the top to the bottom, forming the undulating body of a massive serpent. At the base of the staircase, the stone head of the feathered serpent god Kukulkan completes the illusion. For a brief, breathtaking moment, it appears as if a giant celestial snake is slithering down from the temple to the earth. This phenomenon is so precise, so perfectly engineered, that it leaves no doubt about the advanced astronomical knowledge of the Maya. This wasn't just a clever light show for the masses. It was a deeply encoded political and theological message. The feathered serpent Kukulkan was a deity associated with rebirth, the morning star, and the bringing of knowledge. He was also intimately linked to the ruling class. The king was seen as the human embodiment of Kukulkan, the crucial intermediary between the people and the gods. The descending serpent shadow during the equinox visually demonstrated this connection. It showed the populace that their ruler had the power to call the god down from the heavens, to literally manifest divine presence on earth at a prophesied time. It was the ultimate validation of his authority, a yearly renewal of his divine mandate written in light and stone for all to witness. The hidden message was one of power, stability, and cosmic order, assuring everyone that the king's rule was in perfect harmony with the universe. Beyond the solar year and the equinox spectacle, the pyramid's design encodes even more complex calendar cycles that would have been legible only to the educated priestly class. The 9 main terraces that form the body of the pyramid can be divided by the central staircase, creating 18 sections. This corresponds perfectly to the 18 20-day months that made up the Mayan solar calendar known as the Hab. Furthermore, the 52 panels on each face of the pyramid are believed to represent the 52-year cycle known as the calendar round, the period it took for the 2 main Mayan calendars, the 260-day sacred round and the 365-day solar year, to realign. This was a cycle of immense significance, marking a time of potential renewal and great danger, often celebrated with elaborate ceremonies. For the priests and nobles who could read this numerical code, El Castillo was a multi-layered astronomical computer. It wasn't just a symbol of time, it was a functional tool for tracking it. They could use the structure's features to predict solstices, equinoxes, and the zenith passage of the sun, all vital for scheduling agricultural activities and religious ceremonies. This exclusive knowledge created a powerful intellectual hierarchy. The common people saw the spectacular descent of the serpent and understood the king's power. But only the elite could read the deeper mathematical language of the pyramid, allowing them to control the calendar, predict celestial events, and thereby maintain their privileged position as the keepers of cosmic secrets. El Castillo stands as a testament to a civilization that saw no division between science and spirituality, between architecture and astronomy, weaving them all together into a stone symphony meant to harmonize human life with the infinite cycles of the cosmos. Moving from the grand cosmic stages of Mayan pyramids to the intimate floors of Roman homes, we find a different kind of hidden message, one not of power proclaimed but of faith concealed. In the first few centuries after the death of Christ, to be a Christian in the Roman Empire was a dangerous proposition. Open worship could lead to persecution, arrest, or worse. And so, the faithful had to find subtle, ingenious ways to express their beliefs, to identify themselves to one another, and to worship in the one place they could control, their own homes. They did this not with grand statues or public inscriptions, but through the beautiful, durable, and surprisingly personal medium of the mosaic floor. Woven into the decorative patterns of these floors are some of the most poignant and clever hidden messages from the ancient world. Walk into the triclinium or dining room of a wealthy Roman villa from the 3rd century, and your eye might be drawn to a beautiful, seemingly classical scene. Perhaps it's a depiction of Neptune with his trident or Bacchus with his grapes, but look closer. A common, popular motif was the simple fish. To a Roman official conducting a casual inspection, a mosaic of a fish was just a fish, a common food item, a symbol of the sea, utterly innocuous. But to a Christian, this was one of the most powerful secret symbols of their faith. The Greek word for fish, ichthys, served as a perfect acrostic, Isus Christos Theouios Soter, which translates to Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. A mosaic of one fish, or especially two fish, was a silent, daring declaration of the homeowner's belief in Christ. It was a code word made visual, a signal to fellow believers that they were in a safe house. Another brilliantly disguised symbol was the anchor. In the Roman world, the anchor was a widespread symbol of good luck and safe travel, making it another perfect candidate for hiding in plain sight. For Christians, however, it carried a much deeper dual meaning. Its shape closely resembled a cross, and it served as a powerful symbol of hope, the hope of salvation and the steadfastness of their faith in a turbulent world. The New Testament book of Hebrews even refers to hope as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast. A mosaic featuring a prominent anchor, perhaps nestled amongst other nautical imagery, was therefore a profound theological statement, a declaration of unwavering hope in the promise of eternal life, all disguised as a common decorative good luck charm. Perhaps the most touching hidden messages are found in the pastoral scenes that adorned many Roman homes. A mosaic showing a young, handsome shepherd carrying a lamb on his shoulders would have appeared perfectly at home in any Roman villa, reflecting a common, idealized vision of rural life. But for Christians, this was a direct and powerful depiction of Jesus as the Good Shepherd, a central figure from their scriptures who lays down his life for his sheep. This image allowed Christian families to gaze upon a representation of their Savior daily, to teach their children about him through this disguised image, and to reflect on his sacrifice, all while any pagan visitor would see nothing more than a pleasant, bucolic decoration. The message of devotion and salvation was hidden within a genre seen so ordinary it became invisible to those not in the know. Beyond these symbolic images, some mosaics contained even more elaborate coded messages for the initiated. Some scholars believe certain complex geometric patterns or specific arrangements of birds, flowers, and vines were not random. The number of petals on a flower, the count of birds in a tree, or the specific sequence of letters in a border inscription could be a reference to an important verse from the Bible, such as the numbers 3, 7, or 12, which held great significance. A design with 8 birds might secretly reference the 8 people saved on Noah's Ark, a symbol of salvation. A pattern that subtly formed the Greek letters chi and rho, the first 2 letters of Christ's name, could be integrated into the winding tendrils of a vine. These were layers of encryption within the art itself, a secret language of faith shared by a community living under constant threat, ensuring their most sacred truths were preserved right beneath the feet of the very empire that sought to suppress them. Yet for all their openness to reinterpretation, some of the most compelling hidden messages on these vases were not about myth at all, but about the volatile political world of ancient Athens. In a society where direct criticism of powerful figures could be dangerous, the vase painter's brush became a tool for subtle dissent or support. A scene of the Trojan War might feature a hero whose armor or posture deliberately echoed that of a contemporary Athenian general, a sly visual pun that could either glorify or mock the living man by comparing him to a legendary figure. Conversely, a depiction of a tyrant being slain, like the famous scene of Harmodius and Aristogiton, was not just a historical reminder but a potent piece of democratic propaganda, celebrating the assassination of a real tyrant and reinforcing the ideals of the Athenian state. These vases, circulating in the private homes of the elite, were a medium for political dialogue, allowing artists and their patrons to engage in coded debates about current events and leadership without ever speaking a treacherous word. The hidden message was one of civic engagement, a reminder that the values of the city-state were woven into the very fabric of its culture, even into the pottery used at a dinner party. Perhaps the most fascinating and elusive hidden messages are those that seem to point towards early philosophical or mystical ideas. Some vases feature strange, anomalous details that defy standard mythological interpretation. A scene of Dionysus might include an unusual symbol, like a specific type of flower or an oddly positioned star, that scholars believe could be a reference to Orphic or Eleusinian mystery cult, secretive religious groups that promised initiates a blessed afterlife. These symbols would have been meaningless to the average viewer, but for someone who had undergone the secret rites, they would act as a recognizable sign, a silent nod to a shared, esoteric knowledge about the nature of the soul and the divine. In this way, a common wine cup could transform into a sacred object for the initiated, its hidden message serving as a touchstone for beliefs considered too profound or too dangerous to be spoken aloud in the Athenian agora. The vase painter, therefore, was far more than a decorator. He was a storyteller, a political commentator, and sometimes even a theologian, using his fluid brush to layer meaning upon meaning, ensuring that even the most familiar myth could contain a secret waiting to be uncovered by the right pair of eyes. Yet for all the political and philosophical whispers on Greek pottery, few ancient artistic traditions have been as widely misunderstood as the breathtakingly explicit sculptural masterpieces that adorn the temples of India, particularly the famous clusters at Khajuraho. To the uninformed Western eye first encountering these images in the 19th century, they appeared to be scandalous, even pornographic, celebrations of physical pleasure utterly out of place on a religious structure. This superficial reading couldn't be further from the truth. These intricate carvings are in fact one of the world's most sophisticated systems of encrypted spiritual knowledge, a visual language where every embrace, every gesture, and every pairing is a profound metaphor for the union of the human soul with the divine. The foundational principle behind this hidden symbolism is the core tantric concept of the universe itself being born from the dynamic interplay of two fundamental, complementary forces. The masculine principle of Purusha, which is consciousness, stillness, and pure awareness, and the feminine principle of Prakriti, which is nature, energy, creativity, and matter. In their separated state, the universe is inert, but in their sacred union, the entire cosmos comes into being and is sustained. The erotic sculptures are not depicting sexual acts for their own sake, they are illustrating this cosmic dance. Each couple represents the microcosmic echo of this macrocosmic event. The physical union of the male and female figures is a symbol for the ultimate spiritual goal, the awakening of the individual's dormant spiritual energy, known as Kundalini, and its ascent through the energy centers of the body to achieve enlightenment and unite with universal consciousness. This journey is mapped onto the very architecture of the temple itself, which is designed as a symbolic Mount Meru, the axis of the world in Hindu cosmology. As a devotee would walk clockwise around the temple in a ritual circumambulation, their path would take them past these sculptures arranged in a specific ascending order. The figures at the lower levels often depict the worldly and the mundane scenes of everyday life, music, and battle. But as the eye moves upward, the sculptures become more explicitly symbolic, culminating in the famous Mithuna pairs, the divine couples in intimate embrace, placed strategically near the temple's summit. This was a deliberate pedagogical path. The devotee was being visually guided from the distractions of the physical world toward the highest spiritual realization, which is this sacred union. The message was that transcendence isn't about rejecting the physical world, but about understanding its deepest essence as a manifestation of divine energy. Specific positions and pairings hold specific encrypted meanings that would have been instantly recognizable to a tantric initiate. A common motif is the figure of a woman applying makeup or looking into a mirror while a lover embraces her from behind. On one level, this is a beautiful, naturalistic scene, but on the esoteric level, the mirror is a classic symbol of Maya, the illusion of the material world that distracts us from true reality. The woman's gaze into the mirror, even while in a state of union, represents the aspirant's challenge to engage with the world of form without being ensnared by its illusions, to see through the reflection to the ultimate truth that lies beyond it. The embrace itself signifies that this realization happens not through ascetic denial, but through the full, conscious embrace of the world's energy. Other sculptures show multiple figures intertwined in complex configurations. These are not fantasies but precise visual representations of energy channels or nadis within the subtle body. The three most important channels, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, are depicted through the interlocking limbs of the figures, showing the pathway for the Kundalini energy to rise. The ecstatic expressions on the faces of the figures are not expressions of physical pleasure, but of Ananda, the bliss of spiritual awakening that comes when this energy reaches the crown of the head. For the initiate, viewing these sculptures was a form of meditation and a memory aid, a permanent external reference for the internal, invisible processes they were striving to achieve through years of practice. This artistic tradition flourished within specific tantric schools that taught that spiritual liberation could be attained here and now, within one's own body, by mastering and transmuting its energies rather than by rejecting them. The temple walls served as an open yet secret library of these advanced teachings. To the uninitiated, they were either shocking or simply beautiful art. But to those with the key, they were a detailed roadmap to enlightenment, a daring and revolutionary statement that the divine is not separate from us, but is to be found in the most profound and intimate union of all the dualities within ourselves. Leaving behind the vibrant and explicit spiritual metaphors of India, we now journey to the misty landscapes of the British Isles, where an entirely different but equally complex visual language was being perfected. In the quiet scriptoriums of medieval Irish monasteries, monks bent over vellum pages, their pens creating some of the most intricate and mesmerizing art the world has ever seen. The pages of manuscripts like the Book of Kells are a riot of color and form, but it is the endless, seemingly perfect knots that often draw the eye. To the casual observer, these interlaced patterns are simply breathtaking decoration, a testament to almost superhuman patience and skill. But what if these knots were more? Many scholars believe that within their endless loops and weaves, Celtic artists hid profound layers of meaning, transforming decorative art into a meditative puzzle of faith, science, and secret knowledge. On the most accessible level, the knotwork served a powerful Christian symbolic purpose, perfectly suited for a culture that was blending its ancient pagan identity with a new faith. The most straightforward interpretation is that the uninterrupted, endless path of a Celtic knot, with no beginning and no end, is a perfect metaphor for eternity and the infinite nature of God's love. A knot that forms a closed loop could represent the circle of life, death, and rebirth in a spiritual context, or the everlasting life promised to believers. This was a way to express core Christian tenets in a visual language that felt familiar to a people whose pre-Christian art already valued complex patterns and natural forms. The famous Celtic Trinity knot, with its three interlocking vesica piscis shapes, is a clear, though stylized, reference to the Holy Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, three distinct entities existing as one inseparable unity. This symbol allowed monks to preach and reinforce doctrine without writing a single word, making the message accessible to even the illiterate. But for the educated monks who created them, the knots may have held much deeper, more concealed lessons. The creation of such perfect mathematical patterns requires a deep understanding of geometry, symmetry, and grid systems. Some researchers propose that the more complex knots are not random at all, but are graphical representations of mathematical concepts, perhaps even encoding ratios and theorems that the monks were studying from classical texts that had been preserved in their libraries. The process of drawing the knot, plotting its points, understanding its over and under sequence was a form of intellectual discipline, a meditation on order and chaos, much like solving an intricate equation. The hidden message here was one of intellectual pursuit, showing that the study of mathematics was not separate from faith, but was a path to understanding the divine order of the universe. This leads to one of the most intriguing theories, that certain grand knotwork panels, particularly those found on high crosses like Muiadach's cross at Monasterbois, are not merely decorative borders but are actually encoded maps of spiritual pilgrimage. During this period, undertaking a physical pilgrimage to holy sites was a central act of devotion, but it was a journey fraught with danger and expense that many could never afford. Some art historians suggest that these complex knots, with their single, unbroken path, chart a spiritual journey instead. A pilgrim could trace the path with their finger or their eye, following its loops and turns as a metaphorical path of faith, encountering challenges and moments of clarity represented by the knot's tight corners and long, sweeping curves. The entire journey, from start to finish, exists on one plane, symbolizing that the ultimate destination of spiritual enlightenment is not a physical place, but a state of being that one can reach through meditation and devotion, right where they stand. Perhaps the most captivating idea is that these patterns hold astronomical information. Certain recurring motifs, like key patterns and spiral designs that often accompany knotwork, have been analyzed for their potential alignment with celestial events. A specific series of knots on a cross slab might align with the solstice sunrise, casting shadows that interact with the carved patterns in a specific way on only one day of the year. Others have looked at the complex layouts of knots in manuscripts and seen potential correlations with the movements of planets or the patterns of stars. While this remains a speculative theory, it fits a pattern we've seen across ancient cultures: a desire to encode their most important knowledge, their understanding of time and the cosmos, into their most sacred art. For the Celtic monk, the entire universe was a creation of God, and so weaving the logic of the heavens into the pages of a gospel book was the highest form of praise, a hidden message of celestial harmony meant for an audience of both the divine and the deeply learned. Now we journey to the heart of the Byzantine Empire, where art was not created for mere decoration or even storytelling, but was instead considered a window into heaven itself. In the glittering mosaics of Hagia Sophia and the serene panels of portable icons, we find a tradition where every color, every gesture, and every glance was meticulously designed to convey the most complex theological doctrines of the Christian faith. This was a world where the overwhelming majority of the population could not read the Bible, and so the Church offered them a Bible in pictures, a symbolic language so rich and precise that it could communicate the nature of the divine to an illiterate farmer as powerfully as to a learned theologian. But within these seemingly straightforward holy images, the artists often embedded a second, deeper layer of meaning, a hidden theology accessible only to those trained to see it. Consider the specific, symbolic use of color, which was never chosen at random. The deep blue of the Virgin Mary's robes, for instance, was not just a decorative choice. It was a precise theological statement. This particular shade, often made from crushed lapis lazuli, an incredibly expensive pigment imported from Afghanistan, symbolized the heavens. When Mary wears this color, she is being identified as the one who contained the uncontainable God, the human vessel who carried the divine presence of heaven within her. Conversely, the Christ child is often depicted clothed in a regal gold or a earthy brown, signifying his dual nature, the gold representing his divine kingship and the brown his humble, incarnate humanity. Even the background of many icons, a shimmering sheet of gold leaf, is far more than a beautiful backdrop. It represents the eternal, uncreated light of God's kingdom, the divine reality that the figures inhabit and from which they gaze out at the viewer. This color symbolism was a silent, visual creed, affirming the Church's teachings on the Incarnation and the nature of Christ without a single word being spoken. The gestures and poses of the figures are another meticulously coded language. The way a saint holds their hand is never casual. A common gesture is one where the fingers are held in a specific configuration. The thumb and ring finger touch, symbolizing the union of Christ's divine and human natures, while the three remaining fingers represent the Holy Trinity. This single-hand gesture is a compact visual sermon on the most foundational doctrines of the faith. The direction of a figure's gaze is equally significant. A saint who looks directly out at the viewer is inviting a personal connection, acting as an intercessor praying on our behalf. But figures shown in profile are often understood to be engaged in a sacred narrative or existing in a different spiritual plane, separating the world of the story from the world of the worshipper. The spatial arrangement of figures within the icon also holds deep meaning. Characters are not placed to create an illusion of three-dimensional space, but to show a hierarchy of holiness. The most important figures are largest, not because they are closer, but because they are spiritually greater, while angels and lesser saints are often shown smaller, their size denoting their place in the celestial order. For the initiated clergy, however, some icons contained even more esoteric messages through hidden inscriptions and symbolic elements. On the surface, an icon of the Virgin Mary holding the Christ child appears to be a simple depiction of maternal affection. But specific types of this image, known by their Greek names, carry distinct theological weight. The Hodgetria type, where Mary gestures toward the child with her hand, means she who shows the way, presenting Christ as the path to salvation. The Eliausa type, where the child presses his cheek against his mother's, embodies tenderness and emphasizes the humanity of God who experienced human love and suffering. These subtleties were a form of advanced theological shorthand for the educated. Perhaps the most fascinating hidden elements are the tiny, almost microscopic inscriptions sometimes worked into the halos or backgrounds of figures. To the average worshipper, these might appear as simple decorative lines, but to a literate priest, these were Greek abbreviations for the figure's sacred titles. The letters Omicron Omega Nu in Christ's halo, for example, stand for Ho-On, or He Who Is, a direct reference to the divine name God gave to Moses in the burning bush. An icon of the Archangel Michael might include a tiny inscription identifying him as Omicron Alpha Rho Chi I, Ota Sigma Tau, Rho Alpha Tau Eta Gamma Omicron Sigma, the chief commander. These were not just labels, they were precise doctrinal affirmations, ensuring that the figure was venerated correctly according to church canon. In an age of fierce theological debates about the nature of Christ and the validity of icons, these hidden inscriptions served as orthodoxy's first line of defense, embedding the correct teaching directly into the image itself, making the icon both an object of devotion and an unassailable statement of faith. From the intricate theological codes of Byzantium, we now enter a world of breathtaking beauty and perilous subtlety, the royal courts of Persia, where art became a sophisticated language of power, flattery, and sometimes daring dissent. Persian miniature paintings are renowned for their exquisite detail, vibrant colors, and poetic scenes of romance, battle, and courtly life. To the untrained eye, they are masterpieces of illustration, designed to accompany great literary works and glorify the patron who commissioned them. But for those who knew how to look, these same paintings could conceal a dangerous second narrative, a hidden world of political allegory, veiled criticism, and predictions about the fate of empires, all cleverly disguised within the seemingly innocent and opulent scenes. This practice of embedding hidden messages was born from a climate of immense political pressure. In the absolute monarchies of the Safavid and Timurid empires, openly criticizing a shah or a powerful vizier could lead to imprisonment, torture, or execution. Yet, the artists and intellectuals within the court were often keen observers of the political machinations around them. They found a way to voice their commentary, their fears, and their hopes through a complex visual language of symbols that would be understood only by a small, educated elite. their fellow courtiers, poets, and high-ranking officials. The miniature was a perfect medium for this. It was a prized object studied closely by the very people it might be critiquing, yet its true meaning could be denied at any moment under the guise of mere decoration or traditional storytelling. One of the most common methods of encoding these messages was through the use of symbolic animals, a tradition with deep roots in Persian poetry. A scene from a royal hunt, a popular subject for miniatures, might appear to be a simple celebration of the king's prowess. But if you look closer, the animals depicted could tell a very different story. A lion, traditionally a symbol of royalty and courage, might be shown cowering or wounded, a subtle indictment of a ruler's weakness or a recent military defeat. A pack of jackals attacking a noble stag could represent corrupt court officials preying upon the state treasury or the common people. Even the placement of these animals was significant. An animal turning its back on the central figure of the king could symbolize disloyalty or impending rebellion, a visual whisper of treason that would be impossible to utter aloud. Color, too, carried a coded weight far beyond its aesthetic appeal. The lavish use of gold always denoted divinity, royalty, and supreme power, but other hues had more nuanced meanings. The color blue, made from precious lapis lazuli, was associated with the celestial and the divine, but it could also signify truth and wisdom. A courtier depicted in brilliant blue robes might be silently praised as a voice of reason in a corrupt court. Conversely, green, while often representing paradise and nature, could also suggest treachery and poison if used in a specific context, such as on the garments of a figure whispering in the Shah's ear. The artist's palette was a political instrument, allowing them to assign virtue or vice to a figure without writing a single damning word. Perhaps the most daring allegories were those that used classic stories from Persian literature, like Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, as a thin veil for contemporary politics. An episode depicting a tyrannical ancient king being overthrown could serve as a stern warning to a current ruler who was overstepping his bounds. A scene of a beloved hero like Rostam facing impossible odds might be a commentary on a loyal general struggling against a scheming court faction. The beauty of this method was its perfect deniability. If challenged, the artist could always claim they were merely illustrating the epic poem faithfully. Only those with insider knowledge of current events would understand the pointed parallel, making the miniature a form of exclusive political gossip rendered in pigment and gold leaf. These paintings were not always critiques. They could also be hopeful prophecies or complex power plays. A patron might commission a work that showed him in a favorable light next to a legendary ruler, visually arguing for his own legitimacy and greatness. A miniature predicting a prosperous future, shown through symbols of abundant harvests and peaceful skies, could be designed to flatter a ruler and secure the artist's position. Yet, even this flattery could contain a hidden edge. By depicting an idealized version of rule, the artist might be subtly implying that the current reality fell short. In the silent, glittering world of the Persian miniature, every brushstroke could be a calculated risk, a beautiful and dangerous game where art became the last refuge for truths too dangerous to speak. And from the subtle political commentaries of Persian courts, we journey to a land of ancient, enduring wisdom, where the very landscape itself is a sacred text. For over 60,000 years, Australian Aboriginal cultures have maintained an unbroken connection to their land, and their art is not a separate decoration but a vital, functional language, a living map of memory, lore, and spirit. To an untrained outsider, a painting on rock or bark might appear as a beautiful but abstract pattern of dots, lines, and animal forms, but this is a profound misreading. These works are meticulously encoded cartographies of the dreaming, the sacred era of creation, embedding navigational instructions, ecological knowledge, and deep spiritual lore into every symbol and hue, a hidden message system that has successfully preserved a culture's most vital knowledge for millennia. The concept of the dream time is fundamental to understanding this encrypted art. It is not a past event but a continuous, ever-present reality, a parallel dimension where ancestral beings created the world, its landforms, its people, and its laws. An Aboriginal painting is rarely a depiction of a single moment. It is a multi-layered map of this eternal dreaming. A series of concentric circles might represent a waterhole, a campsite, or a sacred mountain where an ancestral event occurred. Wavy lines connecting them are not mere decoration but song lines or dreaming tracks, the paths walked by the creator ancestors. To paint these paths is to recount their journey, to sing the country into being again with every brushstroke. This art is therefore a visual chorus in an ongoing ceremony, a way to maintain the world itself by continually reaffirming the sacred connections first established in the dreaming. This mapping function is intensely practical. In a vast and often arid continent, survival depended on an encyclopedic knowledge of resources. Aboriginal artists embedded this survival manual into their work. A painting might appear to be a depiction of a kangaroo dreaming story, but within that narrative, specific symbols indicate the location of a secret spring or a particular type of edible root. The use of color is never arbitrary. Ochres sourced from specific locations themselves tell a story. A deep yellow might come from a particular cliff face, and its use in a painting immediately connects the artwork to that place, acting as both a signature and a locator. The patterns of dots which so captivate the modern eye often serve to obscure sacred information from the uninitiated while simultaneously representing topographical features like sandhills, starry skies, or rainfall, layers of meaning accessible only to those who hold the cultural keys to decipher them. The transmission of this knowledge was and is a carefully guarded process. A painting is not a standalone object to be hung on a wall. It is an illustrative aid for a story that is sung, danced, and told by a custodian who has inherited the rights to that specific dreaming. A single symbol can unlock an entire epic poem that details the creation of a mountain range, the moral laws regarding marriage and kinship, and the precise location of every water source along a 100-mile route. The hidden message is not just in the paint, it is in the performance that accompanies it. An elder pointing to a symbol on a bark painting while singing the corresponding song is performing an act of layered communication, teaching geography, history, law, and spirituality in one inseparable lesson. This system ensured that the most sensitive ecological knowledge, such as the location of a rare waterhole, remained hidden from rival groups while being perfectly preserved within the culture through art and ceremony. This deep integration of art and survival reveals a world where there is no distinction between the spiritual and the practical, between a map and a scripture. A painting of a honey ant dreaming, for example, is simultaneously a spiritual narrative about an ancestral being, a legal document outlining who has the right to collect honey ants in a specific territory, and a biological field guide indicating the exact type of acacia tree under which they can be found. The artwork does not just represent the land, it is the land in the same way that the dreaming is not a story about the world but the world itself. For the Aboriginal people, these paintings are a triumphant affirmation that their culture is not lost in time but is a living, breathing, mapping presence, a continuous conversation with a country that is forever singing its own story through the hands of its artists. Crossing the Pacific from the ancient songlines of Australia, we arrive on the humid coastal plains of ancient Mexico, where a civilization often called Mesoamerica's mother culture left behind one of the most imposing and enigmatic artistic legacies, the Olmec colossal heads. Carved from single, massive blocks of basalt and weighing up to 24 tons each, these stern, helmeted visages seem to stare out from the depths of time with an air of undeniable authority. For decades, the primary question was simply, who are they? The prevailing theory is that they are portraits of powerful Olmec rulers. But if we move beyond that initial question and look closer, particularly at the elaborate and unique headgear each one wears, we begin to see that these sculptures are far more than just royal portraits. They are intricate ceremonial codes carved in stone, potentially containing encrypted information about the nature of Olmec rulership, their sophisticated understanding of time, and even specific world-altering events. Let's start with the most obvious feature, the helmets themselves. No two headdresses on the colossal heads are exactly alike. Each one is a complex arrangement of straps, pads, and symbols. Some feature elaborate knots, while others are adorned with what appear to be feathers, animal claws, or even identifiable creatures like jaguars or eagles. This variation is our first major clue. It strongly suggests these are not generic military helmets but specific ceremonial regalia. Each element likely signified a particular achievement, a sacred title, or a connection to a powerful spiritual force. For instance, a headdress featuring prominent jaguar motifs would instantly communicate the ruler's association with this fearsome animal, a symbol of shamanic power, the night, and the underworld in Olmec religion. It was a way of saying, this leader doesn't just command armies, he commands the very forces of nature. The headgear acts as a heraldic device, a stone resume detailing the divine and earthly sources of the ruler's power for all to see, yet its full meaning would only be decipherable to those educated in the Olmec symbolic language. This leads to one of the most compelling theories, that these helmets are not merely symbolic but functional in an astronomical or calendrical sense. The Olmec are credited by many scholars with developing the foundational concepts of the famous Mesoamerican long count calendar, a complex system for tracking vast cycles of time. Some researchers, like art historian Carolyn Tate, have proposed that the patterns on the headgear could represent specific dates or astronomical events. The arrangement of straps and knots might correlate with numerical values or significant periods in the calendar cycle. Imagine a specific configuration of 4 straps and 3 knots corresponding to a date of great importance, such as the beginning of a new era or the anniversary of a ruler's accession. The colossal head would then serve as a permanent stone stela, forever marking that moment in time and linking the ruler's reign directly to the cosmic order. His authority was not just political, it was temporally ordained, cemented into the very fabric of time itself. Perhaps the most fascinating and controversial idea is that the colossal heads contain even more literal hidden messages encoded in the facial features themselves. Some researchers suggest that the distinctive markings, the shape of the eyes, or the lines on the cheeks could be stylized representations of the local landscape. A particular curve of a lip might mirror the bend of a sacred river. A scar or marking on the cheek could indicate the location of a significant mountain or a hidden ceremonial cave complex. If true, this would transform the sculptures into 3-dimensional maps, their faces charting the territory the ruler controlled or the sacred geography that legitimized his rule. This knowledge would be incredibly powerful and restricted, a secret understanding of the land's spiritual and practical resources known only to the elite. The common person would see a fearsome leader, the initiated priest or noble would see a map of their world. Furthermore, the sheer effort required to transport these multi-ton stones from quarries dozens of miles away through swamps and rivers suggests the events they commemorated were of cataclysmic importance. It wasn't just a portrait session, it was a monumental undertaking to make a permanent statement. One theory posits that a head might have been commissioned to commemorate a ruler who successfully guided his people through a great crisis, like a volcanic eruption or a period of severe drought, events evidenced in the geological record. The specific headdress could then tell the story of that event, perhaps symbols of water and renewal after a drought, or imagery of the earth and fire after an eruption. The stoic, determined expression on the face of the ruler would then represent resilience and strength in the face of disaster, a permanent reminder of who led them to survival. The hidden message is one of triumph over chaos, a story of civilization's fragility and the leader who ensured its continuity, encoded in stone for future generations to remember. High above the bustling medieval market towns, in the sunlit silence of the soaring naves, the great cathedrals of Europe stand as monuments to faith and collective effort. Yet for all their grandeur, these stone forests were built not by anonymous hands, but by individual, highly skilled artisans. And if you know where to look, you can still find their personal marks, discreetly chiseled into the undersides of stones, on hidden buttresses, and high upon inaccessible arches. These are the stonemason's marks, and to dismiss them as simple signatures would be to overlook a fascinating, multi-layered language of stone, one that functioned as a practical record, a guild safeguard, and perhaps even a conduit for ideas too dangerous to speak aloud. On the most basic level, these symbols were a mason's signature, his unique professional identification. In an era before standardized blueprints and centralized payrolls, a cathedral was a massive, multi-generational project employing hundreds of masons who were paid by the piece. Each craftsman was responsible for carving his assigned block at the quarry or on the ground, and when it was perfectly fitted into the wall, he would carve his personal mark onto it. This allowed the master builder to walk the site, identify who had carved which stone, and ensure the individual was paid accurately for his work. It was a system of quality control and accountability, a medieval barcode etched in granite and limestone. The marks themselves were usually simple geometric designs, a set of intersecting lines, a unique notch, a crescent, or a stylized letter easily and quickly carved with a few strokes of the chisel. Families often used variations of the same mark, passed down from father to son, creating a dynastic signature in stone that spanned the decades of construction. But these marks were far more than just time cards. They were also a guild member's proof of membership and a guarantee of quality. Stonemasons' guilds were powerful and secretive organizations that protected the trade's secrets and maintained exceptionally high standards. A mason's mark was essentially his seal of approval. A block bearing a known, reputable mark was a promise that it had been cut to precise specifications and would bear the immense weight and stress of the structure. Conversely, a faulty stone could be traced back to its creator, who would be held responsible both financially and professionally. This system embedded a powerful incentive for excellence directly into the fabric of the building. The mark was a craftsman's reputation, his honor, made permanent in the very house of God. It was a silent vow to his brothers in the guild and to the divine that his work was flawless. This is where the theories venture into more speculative yet utterly compelling territory. The guilds were not just trade unions, they were repositories of advanced, even esoteric knowledge. Their members possessed a profound understanding of sacred geometry, mathematics, and structural engineering that seemed almost miraculous to the common populace. Some researchers propose that these simple marks were more than signatures, they were part of a coded technical language. A specific symbol might indicate the type of stone, its intended position in the structure, or even specific instructions for how it should be oriented or load-bearing calculations it had to meet. This would have allowed a master builder from one country to direct a team of local masons who spoke a different language, using a universal symbolic code they all understood. The mark ensured that a complex puzzle of thousands of unique stones could be assembled with perfect precision by a constantly shifting workforce, all communicating through a silent, chiseled alphabet. The most tantalizing theory connects these marks to the circulation of heretical or proto-scientific ideas. The church was the ultimate patron, but the builders were the intellectuals, the engineers, the freethinkers. Could they have used their symbols to secretly encode concepts that ran counter to official church doctrine? Some scholars, tracing patterns of specific symbols across different cathedrals, suggest that certain complex marks might represent astronomical alignments, geometric ratios like the golden mean, or philosophical concepts rooted in pre-Christian traditions. A pattern of marks placed in a specific sequence on a column might chart the path of a solstice sunbeam. Another set might form a constellation on a vaulted ceiling. This would have been a way for the builders to sign their work with their deepest intellectual beliefs, embedding a hidden layer of meaning that only other initiated masons could read, right under the nose of their theological overseers. They were leaving a message for the future, a testament to the idea that true divine harmony was found not just in prayer, but in the perfect, immutable laws of mathematics and the cosmos, laws they had mastered and woven into the very bones of the cathedral itself. Now we glide into the bustling, vibrant world of Edo period Japan, a society strictly controlled by a military government, yet bursting with the creative energy of a wealthy merchant class. Here, among the tea houses and theaters, a new art form flourished, ukiyo-e, or pictures of the floating world. These stunning woodblock prints, mass-produced for a popular audience, depicted beautiful women, famous kabuki actors, and dramatic landscapes. Yet for all their accessible beauty, many of these prints concealed a razor-sharp wit and a daring social conscience. In a society with strict censorship laws and a rigid class system, ukiyo-e artists became masters of the visual double entendre, embedding subtle and often hilarious critiques of the social order right under the noses of the authorities. The shogunate's censors were primarily concerned with direct criticism of the government or the depiction of living political figures. To circumvent this, artists developed a sophisticated language of symbolism and illusion. A common tactic was to use historical or literary scenes as a thin veil for contemporary satire. A print ostensibly depicting a famous battle from the tale of the hike might actually be a commentary on a recent political scandal, with the armor and banners of the warriors cleverly modified to resemble those of modern-day officials. Only those in the know, those who followed the gossip of the day, would understand the pointed joke. The artist's brush became a weapon of satire, allowing the public to laugh at their rulers without anyone being able to prove a direct insult had been made. Animals were particularly useful vehicles for this disguised commentary. The government could hardly object to a charming print of cats, but in the hands of an artist like Kuniyoshi, a group of cats dressed in human clothing and behaving badly could be a devastating parody of corrupt bureaucrats. A print titled Cats, suggested as the 53 Stations of the Decoded, is a brilliant example. It replaces the famous way stations of the Great Coastal Road with felines arranged in human poses, a whimsical surface that masks a sharp observation on the human comedy playing out along that very route. Similarly, a giant carp struggling upstream might symbolize the determined but often futile efforts of the common merchant class to rise within a system designed to keep them in their place. Perhaps the most daring critiques were hidden within the portraits of kabuki actors, the rock stars of their day. The government frequently issued sumptuary laws, dictating what each class could wear and own in an effort to curb the rising influence of the wealthy merchant class. Yet in actor prints, artists like Shiroko would depict these celebrities in outrageously lavish and elaborate costumes that blatantly flouted these very laws. The message was clear: popular culture and wealth would not be so easily contained by outdated edicts. Furthermore, the exaggerated, almost grotesque expressions Shiroko captured were not just dramatic. They were seen as penetratingly honest portraits that stripped away the glamour to reveal the actor's true character, a subtle jab at a society obsessed with surface appearances and social posturing. Some prints went beyond general satire to document specific, forbidden events. The great reform efforts of the 1840s, known as the Tenpo reforms, attempted to combat a severe economic crisis by cracking down on luxury, which, of course, included the popular ukiyo-e prints themselves. In response, artists found ingenious ways to protest. One famous print by Kuniyoshi appears to be a simple, innocuous image of a humorous folktale about a hero fighting a giant skeleton. But for a contemporary audience, the skeletal monster was instantly recognizable as the despised chief censor, Mizuno Echizen no Kami. The artist had literally turned the government official into a public villain, a monstrous force to be defeated, a sentiment everyone felt but no one could safely say aloud. It was an act of breathtaking audacity, a hidden message so powerful that despite its disguise, Kuniyoshi is said to have been punished for it. Through layers of mythology, animal symbolism, and bold visual puns, the artists of the floating world proved that even in the most controlled of societies, the desire to speak truth to power will always find a way to make its mark. Venturing now into the heart of sub-Saharan Africa, we encounter a tradition where art is not a static object of contemplation but a living, breathing vessel for the spirit. Across countless cultures, from the Dan of Liberia to the Bamako of Cameroon, tribal masks are far more than dramatic ceremonial wear. They are intricate, three-dimensional languages, their every element a carefully chosen word in a spiritual dialogue understood only by the initiated. The choice of wood, the application of color, the specific shape of the eyes and mouth, none of this is arbitrary. Each decision encodes a profound message about the mask's identity, its power, and its sacred role within the community, creating a hidden communication system that operates on multiple, simultaneous levels. Consider first the profound symbolism of materials. The type of wood selected to carve a mask was of paramount importance. A hard, dense wood from an ancient, towering tree might be chosen for a mask representing a powerful ancestral spirit, its durability symbolizing the enduring strength and wisdom of the elders. Conversely, a lighter wood could be used for masks worn in long, energetic dances, their physical property reflecting the agility required of the performer. But the meaning goes deeper than practicality. The very act of carving was a spiritual transformation, a process of revealing the spirit believed to be sleeping within the tree. The carver wasn't creating something new, he was liberating a pre-existing spiritual entity, and the final form of the mask was a collaborative effort between human skill and the will of the spirit within the wood. The application of pigments after carving added another potent layer of coded meaning. The limited palette of traditional colors, derived from clay, charcoal, plants, and minerals, each carried a specific, powerful charge. White, often made from kaolin clay, was universally associated with the spirit world, with ancestors, and with purity. A mask painted white was understood to be a direct conduit to the realm of the dead. Red, from iron-rich ochres, symbolized blood, life, power, and danger. It could represent the vitality of the community or the fierce, aggressive energy of a warrior spirit. Black, from charcoal, was linked to the night, to the unknown, to the primordial mysteries before creation, and could also signify wisdom and maturity. A mask combining these colors was weaving a complex narrative, perhaps representing a spirit that bridged the world of the living and the dead, embodying both ancestral wisdom and potent, life-giving force. The design of the facial features themselves is perhaps the most direct form of encryption. The shape of the eyes is particularly telling. Wide, circular eyes often signify a spirit that is alert, vigilant, and all-seeing, a guardian entity watching over the village. Narrow, slit-like or half-closed eyes might suggest a state of inner contemplation, a connection to the world of dreams or the peaceful demeanor of a wise elder. The mouth is equally expressive. An open, bared mouth with sharp teeth communicates aggression, used for masks meant to intimidate evil forces or enforce social order. A small, pursed mouth denotes silence, secrecy, and the gravity of the wisdom being channeled. Even the overall facial structure carries meaning. An elongated, heart-shaped face is common among masks representing female beauty and virtue, while a heavy, square jaw denotes masculine strength and authority. Yet for all this layered symbolism, some masks held their most profound secrets literally hidden from view, only to be revealed at the climactic moment of a ceremony. Certain masks, particularly among the Bwa and Guernsey peoples of Burkina Faso, are renowned for their incredible size and complex, abstract geometric patterns. From a distance, these patterns appear as a dazzling, hypnotic display, but during the dance, the performer will execute a specific, rapid spinning motion. As the mask whirls, the clean lines and sharp angles of the patterns blur and transform into entirely new, fleeting images, perhaps a bird in flight, a twisting serpent, or the face of an ancestor. This kinetic revelation is a breathtaking dramatic device, a way for the spirit to visually demonstrate its power of transformation and its connection to multiple realms at once. Other masks incorporated actual physical secrets. Some Congolese penned masks were crafted with hidden compartments within the headdress or the cheeks. These small spaces might hold potent medicinal substances, fragments of bone from a revered ancestor, or other sacred relics known as bilongo. These materials were believed to actively charge the mask with spiritual power, making it a literal container for magic. The wearer and the attending ritual specialists knew of these compartments, but the general audience did not. The revelation of this hidden power, perhaps through a gesture indicating the source of the mask's strength, would be a pivotal or inspiring moment in the ritual, cementing the authority of the spirit and the secret knowledge of the initiates who served it. In this tradition, the mask is not a representation of power. Through its hidden elements and the performance it dictates, it becomes the very engine of it. Leaving behind the visual languages of masks and prints, we ascend into the high Andes of South America, where an empire of unparalleled organizational genius managed its vast territories without what we would recognize as a written script. Instead, the Inca civilization perfected a three-dimensional language of knots and chords known as the quipu. To the Spanish conquistadors who encountered them, these bundles of strings appeared to be mere primitive accounting tools if they were noticed at all. But we now understand that the quipu was far more than a simple abacus. It was a sophisticated, multi-variable data storage device and potentially a narrative medium. A hidden writing system whose full poetic depth may be forever lost to us, waiting silently in the twists of its chords for the right minds to finally decode it. At its most basic functional level, a quipu is a collection of pendant chords suspended from a main horizontal chord, but within that simple structure lies immense complexity. The Incas encoded information through a stunningly precise system of variables. The type of knot, whether a figure 8, a long knot, or the iconic decimal knot, a series of hitches representing numbers 1 through 9 held specific meaning. The position of the knot on the chord indicated its order of magnitude, much like the place values in our number system. The material of the cord, whether spun from cotton or the hair of a llama or alpaca, could denote importance or category. Most strikingly, the color of the chords was a language in itself. In the Andean world, colors were not just decorative, they were deeply symbolic, representing everything from social hierarchy and deities to geographical direction and elements. A yellow cord might signify gold or a corn harvest, while a black one could represent time or the underworld. By combining these elements, not type, position, material, and color, a quipucamayok, a trained recorder, could store vast datasets on everything from census numbers and tax tributes to military organization and astronomical cycles. This ability to manage data was the engine of the Inca Empire. Imagine a runner arriving at an administrative center in Cusco with a quipu from a distant province. A quipucamayok could read this bundle and know instantly that it detailed the exact number of households in a village, the amount of maize stored in state warehouses, and how many men were available for the next Mita labor draft. This flow of accurate, standardized information allowed the Inca to command an empire stretching thousands of miles without horses or wheeled transport, coordinating the lives of millions of people with an efficiency that stunned the Spanish. The quipu was their database, their spreadsheet, and their couriered report, all woven into a portable, durable format. But the most tantalizing mystery, the true hidden message of the quipu, lies in the possibility that they recorded much more than numbers. Early Spanish chroniclers noted that during their conquest they encountered quipucamayos who used these devices to recount history, recite poetry, and tell the stories of kings and gods. This suggests that some quipus were narrative, not just numerical. How could a knot record a poem? The theory is that the system was so refined that it could encode syllables or entire concepts through non-numerical cues. The spin and ply of a cord, whether it was twisted to the left or the right, might represent a positive or negative concept. The specific way cords were attached to the main strand could indicate a subject or a verb. A unique sequence of colors might tell a well-known story, each hue triggering a memorized passage in the mind of the trained reader. In this light, the quipu becomes a tactile, performative script. The quipucamayok wasn't just reading numbers, he was using the physical object as a mnemonic device to recall vast oral histories, his fingers tracing the knots as his voice gave them life, transforming a silent array of strings into an epic poem or a legal testimony. This transformative potential makes the Spanish suppression of the quipu one of the great cultural tragedies of the conquest. Recognizing that the quipucamayoks were the keepers of Inca history and identity, the Catholic Church declared the devices idolatrous and ordered them destroyed. Thousands were burned, and the knowledge of how to read the narrative quipus largely died with the last masters. Today, scholars are like cryptographers trying to crack a code without a key. They can decipher the numbers on surviving quipus, the census data, and storehouse inventories, but the stories, the songs, and the histories remain locked away, a library of knots whose language we can only partially understand. The quipu stands as a powerful reminder that writing is not solely the domain of ink and parchment. It can be a language of texture, color, and space, a hidden message system that challenges our very definition of what it means to read and to remember. Yet for all the tactile, knotted language of the Inca, our next hidden message requires a shift in perspective, a move from the physical to the philosophical, from the administrative to the deeply personal and spiritual. We now travel to the vibrant intellectual ferment of the Italian Renaissance, a time when the rediscovery of ancient Greek and Egyptian texts was setting the minds of Europe ablaze with new and very old ideas. In the sun-drenched workshops of Florence, artists were no longer seen as mere craftsmen. They were intellectuals, philosophers, and in some cases, initiates into secret schools of thought. And they began to weave these dangerous, heretical ideas into the very fabric of their most famous works, creating devotional art for the public that doubled as encrypted manifestos for a privileged few. This is the world of Renaissance Hermeticism, and masters like Sandro Botticelli and Leonardo da Vinci were its most brilliant cryptographers. To understand these hidden messages, we must first grasp the allure of Hermetic philosophy. Named for the mythical sage Hermes Trismegistus, a fusion of the Greek god Hermes and the Egyptian god Thoth, Hermeticism was a spiritual and intellectual tradition that proposed a breathtakingly unified view of the universe. It taught that the entire cosmos was a divine creation, a vast network of correspondences where everything from the stars in the sky to the minerals in the earth was interconnected and reflected the mind of God. The ultimate goal of the Hermeticist was to achieve a state of divine knowledge or gnosis, to understand these hidden connections and thereby ascend spiritually, even to become a god-like figure himself. For Renaissance humanists, this was a thrilling alternative to the sometimes rigid doctrine of the Church, offering a path to the divine through knowledge and personal revelation. But these were dangerous ideas skirting the edge of heresy, and so they had to be hidden. Sandro Botticelli's monumental painting, Primavera, is a perfect example. On its surface, it is a beautiful, whimsical scene from classical mythology. The goddess Venus stands in a grove with the three Graces dancing to one side and the messenger god Mercury on the other. For a Medici patron, it would be a display of erudition and taste, but for those with the key, every figure, every plant is a Hermetic symbol. The central figure of Venus is not the pagan goddess of love, but a representation of divine love itself, the universal force that binds the cosmos together in harmony, a core Hermetic concept. To her right, Mercury, with his sword raised, is not simply warding off clouds. He is using his caduceus, a symbol of healing and wisdom, to separate the higher, ethereal realities from the lower, material ones, an alchemical process of purification. Even the specific flowers scattered at the feet of the figure of Flora are not random. The iris, the myrtle, and the cornflower were all known to have specific alchemical or medicinal properties. The entire painting is a visual guide to the soul's journey from material entanglement to spiritual enlightenment, a map of the Hermetic path to gnosis disguised as a charming allegory. Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate Renaissance man, took this encoding to even more sophisticated levels. His Virgin of the Rocks exists in two versions, and both are brimming with esoteric symbolism that has puzzled scholars for centuries. The scene depicts the apocryphal meeting of the infant Jesus and John the Baptist, but Leonardo has placed them in a bizarre, grotto-like setting filled with geological and botanical details that are rendered with obsessive scientific accuracy. This setting is the first clue. The cave is a classic Hermetic and alchemical symbol for the vessel of transformation, the sealed container where base matter is transmuted into spiritual gold. The figures are arranged in a perfect pyramidal composition, a structure representing stability, harmony, and the hierarchy of the cosmos, but the most telling details are in the gestures. The angel on the right, Uriel, points directly at John the Baptist, who in turn adores the Christ child. This specific pointing gesture is not just narrative, it is a direct visual reference to the famous maxim of Hermes Trismegistus, as above, so below. The painting illustrates this principle, showing the divine connection between the heavenly realm and its reflection in the earthly one. Perhaps the most daring hidden message is the complete absence of the halos that were standard in religious art of the time. Leonardo omits them not from negligence but from profound theological intent. In Hermetic thought, divinity is not a remote force but an immanent one, present within all of creation and, crucially, within humanity itself. By not separating his holy figures with golden discs, Leonardo is visually arguing that their divinity is inherent, a part of their very being. This was a radical, even dangerous idea that placed immense spiritual power and potential in the individual, a concept that would have been warmly embraced by secretive humanist circles but would have alarmed the church authorities. The painting, therefore, is a silent declaration of a heretical belief that the path to God lies not solely through the church, but through the understanding of nature and the self. These artists, supported by enlightened patrons within the powerful Medici family, were participating in a silent revolution. They used their unparalleled skill to create a visual language that operated on two distinct levels. For the faithful masses, these were moving, beautiful religious scenes that inspired devotion. For the initiated few, the philosophers, the alchemists, the Neoplatonists, they were complex philosophical diagrams, maps of the cosmos, and guides to spiritual ascent. They embedded Hermetic principles into the folds of the Virgin's robe, the gesture of an angel's hand, and the very geometry of their compositions. In doing so, they ensured that these ancient, powerful ideas would survive, hidden in plain sight within the most celebrated art of the age, waiting for future generations to rediscover their encrypted wisdom. Now we traverse from the coded canvases of the Renaissance to the vast, open-air galleries of ancient North America, where the very rock itself became a sacred slate for recording the heavens. Scattered across the deserts of the Southwest, the river valleys of the Midwest, and the granite ridges of the Northeast are thousands of petroglyphs, images pecked into stone by Native American artists over countless generations. For centuries, these carvings of spirals, warriors, and animals like bighorn sheep and turtles were interpreted primarily as records of hunts, territorial markers, or shamanic visions. But a growing body of archaeological and ethnographic evidence suggests a far more sophisticated purpose. Many of these sites are not random collections of art. They are carefully positioned celestial observatories, and the symbols themselves are a complex language encoding astronomical knowledge, spiritual beliefs, and precise records of cataclysmic events that once blazed in the night sky. The first clue to this hidden function is the deliberate placement of the petroglyph sites themselves. They are rarely located for convenience. Instead, they are often found in locations with unique astronomical sightlines. A perfect example is the Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona. Here, a spiral petroglyph known by its modern name, the Sun Dagger, was carved high on a secluded rock face. For most of the year, it appears as a simple, static design. But during the summer solstice, a dagger of sunlight pierces directly through the center of the spiral. At the winter solstice, two daggers of light perfectly bracket it. This is not an accident of nature, it is a meticulously engineered solar calendar. The ancestral Puebloan people who created it used this interplay of light and stone to mark the sun's most critical turning points, signaling the times for planting, harvest, and key ceremonial cycles. The rock art was not just a picture, it was the central component in a massive, immovable astronomical instrument. Beyond solstice markers, many symbols are now believed to be direct representations of constellations, but not in the abstract Greek tradition. Native American star knowledge is deeply practical and woven into the stories of everyday life. A series of dots arranged in a specific pattern near a human figure might represent the Pleiades star cluster. In numerous tribes, the heliacal rising of the Pleiades, its first appearance in the dawn sky, marked the beginning of the new year and was a critical signal for agricultural activities. A carving of a humpbacked flute player, a figure often associated with the Hopi Katchina known as Kokopelli, might also be a depiction of the constellation we call Orion. His hump could represent the stars of Orion's belt, and his flute, the nebulosity below it. In this interpretation, the petroglyph connects a celestial pattern with a cultural hero responsible for bringing music, rain, and fertility to the people, forever linking the cycles of the sky with the well-being of the community on Earth. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for these celestial maps comes from events so dramatic they were literally written in stone. In the year 1054 AD, a star in our galaxy exploded in a supernova so brilliant it was visible in the daytime for nearly a month and lit up the night sky for 2 years. This event, which created the Crab Nebula, was recorded by astronomers in China and the Islamic world. But halfway across the globe, the ancestral Puebloans at what is now Choco Canyon in New Mexico also recorded it. A unique petroglyph at the site shows a 10-pointed star positioned next to a large crescent moon. Through modern astronomical software, we can rewind the sky and see that on the morning of July 5, 1054, the crescent moon was positioned in the exact part of the sky where the supernova would have been visible, almost appearing to cradle the brilliant new star. The petroglyph is therefore a precise historical record, an eyewitness account of a universe in flux, created by people who understood they were seeing an event of profound spiritual significance. This spiritual layer is the ultimate key to understanding these hidden messages. For Native American cultures, the celestial and the terrestrial were not separate realms, they were a continuous, interconnected whole. A supernova was not just a fascinating physical phenomenon. It was a powerful spirit messenger, a portent of great change, perhaps the death and rebirth of a great chief in the sky or a sign from the creators. By carving it into the rock, they were not merely making a scientific notation. They were anchoring that powerful spiritual event into the landscape, integrating it into their worldview, and creating a permanent site for ritual and remembrance. The petroglyph served as a conduit between the earthly and the celestial, a place where the community could connect with the energy of that moment for generations to come. The rock art is a testament to a sophisticated intellectual tradition that saw no division between science and spirituality, forever encoding their understanding of a dynamic, living cosmos into the enduring stone of their sacred homelands. Stepping out from the celestial observatories of ancient America and into the luminous courtyards of medieval mosques and madrasas, we encounter a world where art and intellect merge into a single, transcendent language. At first glance, the intricate tile work adorning these structures appears as an explosion of pure, mesmerizing ornamentation, a kaleidoscope of stars, polygons, and interlacing straps that seems to stretch into infinity. For centuries, Western observers dismissed this as non-representational decoration, a fanciful but ultimately meaningless avoidance of figural imagery. But we now understand that this view couldn't be more mistaken. These patterns are not mere decoration. They are profound visual theorems, a hidden language of geometry that encodes some of the most advanced mathematical ideas of the medieval Islamic world, serving as a breathtaking bridge between the earthly and the divine. The very foundation of this art form is a spiritual and intellectual statement. In the Islamic worldview, the universe is a coherent, orderly creation reflecting the perfect unity and intelligence of God, known as Tawhid. The artist geometers sought to emulate this divine order not by depicting the natural world, but by revealing the underlying, eternal laws that govern it. They worked with the pure, abstract building blocks of creation: the circle representing unity and the origin of all things, the square symbolizing the four cardinal directions and the material world, and the triangle, a dynamic force of balance and harmony. By combining these elements using only a compass and a straight edge, the tools of the geometer, they constructed patterns of staggering complexity that were nonetheless generated from perfectly logical, reproducible principles. This process itself was a form of worship, a meditation on the perfection of divine creation through the mastery of its inherent mathematical logic. Within these interlocking shapes lies a secret that would not be formally described by Western mathematicians for centuries: the concept of infinity. Islamic artists achieved this not through vague suggestion, but through precise, repeatable geometric tricks. Their most powerful tool was the principle of self-similarity, where a large pattern is composed of smaller, identical versions of itself. In a complex star pattern, you will often find that the central shape of a large star is itself a smaller, complete star, and within that, an even smaller one, theoretically continuing down beyond the limits of human perception. This is a direct visualization of a fractal geometric series, a concept not formally defined until the 1970s. The artwork becomes a finite window into an infinite process, a mind-bending representation of a universe without end, inviting the viewer to contemplate the infinite nature of the divine. Beyond two-dimensional infinity, these patterns hold the key to understanding multidimensional space. Some of the most sophisticated designs, particularly the Jiri tiles found on buildings like Iran's Darb-i-Imam shrine, are based on a system of 5 specific tile shapes decorated with line. When these tiles are arranged according to their strict rules, the lines connect across tiles to form a continuous, unbroken strapwork pattern that seems to weave over and under itself. This creates a powerful optical illusion of three-dimensionality on a flat surface, but the genius goes even deeper. The mathematical study of these patterns has revealed that their symmetry groups correspond to quasi-crystal pattern structures that are ordered but never exactly repeat, a concept in crystallography that won its discoverer a Nobel Prize in 1982. These medieval artists, working with simple tiles, had intuitively discovered a form of mathematics that described 5-dimensional space, projected down onto a 2-dimensional plane. They were literally painting pictures of higher dimensions. This was not a happy accident. It was the product of a golden age of science where mathematicians, astronomers, and artists were often one and the same, or worked in close collaboration in great institutions like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Scholars like the 9th century polymath Thabit ibn Qurra wrote extensive treatises on geometry that would have been studied by the master craftsmen. The patterns were a physical manifestation of this advanced scholarship, a way to make abstruse mathematical concepts visually tangible and spiritually resonant. For the educated elite, a wall pattern was a demonstration of a mathematical proof and a cosmological diagram. The repeating, radiating symmetry of a star pattern could represent the emanation of the created world from a single, divine source, while the flawless, error-free execution of the pattern proved the soundness of the underlying logic, a logic that itself was a reflection of the mind of God. For the wider public, the message was absorbed on a subconscious, emotional level. Staring at a wall that shimmered with infinite, multidimensional complexity created a sense of awe and wonder, a feeling of being in the presence of something far greater than oneself. It was a non-verbal sermon on the perfection and unity of creation, an invitation to lose oneself in the contemplation of eternal truth. The mosque became a space where every wall whispered the same hidden message, that the universe is not chaotic, but is governed by a beautiful, intelligible, and infinite order. The art was a portal, using the silent, universal language of mathematics to guide the soul from the world of fleeting forms to the everlasting reality of divine unity, making the complex simple and the infinite intimately knowable. Venturing now into the world of the Vikings, we find a people whose reputation for raiding and exploration is legendary, but whose intellectual sophistication is often overlooked. Beyond the dragon ships and battle axes, the Norse were master carvers of stone and wood, leaving behind thousands of runestones primarily across Scandinavia. Most of these towering monuments served as loud, public declarations they commemorated the dead, boasted of great bridge-building projects, or proudly proclaimed a family's ownership of land. The runes themselves, characters of the Germanic alphabet, were meant to be read aloud to speak the message into eternity, but a fascinating subset of these stones contains a second, quieter voice, a hidden layer of meaning intended only for a select few. Through the use of cipher runes, cryptic patterns, and even deliberate errors, the Vikings embedded secret information within their most public monuments, turning a memorial into a discreet message for those trained to see it. The most common method of encryption was the use of cipher runes, a system where the standard runic alphabet was replaced with an alternative code. One of the most intriguing types is the branch or twig runes known as Kvistruna. In this cipher, the standard runic row is divided into 3 groups. Each rune in the code is represented by a main staff, and the number of branches on one side or the other, along with their position, indicates which group the rune belongs to and its specific order within that group. To the uninitiated, a message written in branch runes looks like nothing more than a series of abstract, repetitive vertical lines with small ticks. But to someone who knew the key, it was a perfectly clear message, hidden behind a screen of apparent nonsense. This wasn't child's play, it was a serious cryptographic tool. A runestone might have its public, open message praising a deceased man's generosity, while a small section carved in branch runes, perhaps on the side or base of the stone, could carry the true, confidential information. So what kind of secrets were worth encoding in stone for centuries? The theories are as compelling as the codes themselves. In a society where inheritance and land rights were paramount, a cipher could discreetly specify the true division of a wealthy chieftain's property, perhaps bypassing a public agreement to favor a particular heir or to hide assets from rivals. The public text might say, Ingvar owned this land, while the cipher adds, but his son Svein holds the western pasture. This stone would then stand as a legally binding yet secret document in plain sight. Another powerful possibility involves navigation and trade routes. The Vikings' success as explorers depended on their closely guarded knowledge of sea lanes, currents, and safe harbors. A runestone placed at a landing site might openly commemorate a successful voyage, but a cipher message could contain precise sailing directions to a newly discovered, resource-rich territory. The coded text might detail the number of days sailed to the west, the location of a fresh water source, or warnings about treacherous shoals. This transformed the monument into a waypoint for fellow explorers from the same family or clan, a treasure map written in a language only they could understand. Perhaps the most dangerous secrets were political. In the volatile world of shifting alliances and kingly ambitions, declaring loyalty to the wrong side could be fatal. A runestone commissioned by a Jarl trying to navigate these treacherous waters might have a public inscription swearing fealty to the current king, but a cipher message could convey his true allegiance to a rival claimant or reveal the location of a secret meeting place for conspirators. The public face of the stone provided a plausible deniability, while the hidden message secured his place with the faction he believed would ultimately triumph. The stone became a gamble carved in rock, a bet on the future that only time would decrypt. Beyond full ciphers, subtler methods were also used. Some runestones feature intentional errors, like inverted runes or sequences that seem to make no sense. Scholars now believe these mistakes could be signatures from the carver, markers of a particular school of rune masters, or even a way to magically activate the power of the inscription, believing a perfect text might attract malicious spirits. A single inverted rune might signal to the knowledgeable that the message should be read with a different intention. This practice shows that for the Vikings, writing was never a purely mechanical act. It was intertwined with magic, power, and the belief that the form of the words held as much power as their meaning. These stones stand as rugged monuments to a complex society that valued blunt honesty as much as it prized clever deception, ensuring their stories, both public and private, would endure long after their longships had turned to dust. From the rugged shores of Viking runestones, we now ascend into the thin, rarefied air of the Himalayas, to a tradition where art is not a representation of the divine but a direct map to achieving it. Tibetan Thangka paintings are far more than the stunningly detailed and colorful religious images they appear to be. They are intricate, multi-layered spiritual tools, precise guides for meditation and repositories of esoteric knowledge. To the uninitiated, a Thangka is a beautiful, complex depiction of a serene Buddha or a fearsome deity. But for a Buddhist practitioner, every element from the specific shade of a robe to the angle of a finger is a carefully chosen word in a visual language designed to lead the mind from distraction to enlightenment, a hidden instruction manual for transforming consciousness itself. The foundation of this encrypted system is a strict set of iconometric principles. Unlike Western artists who prize individual expression, Thangka painters follow ancient, precise geometric grids that dictate the exact proportions and placement of every figure. This rigidity is not a limitation but the very source of the painting's power. The grid ensures the deity is depicted in a state of perfect symmetry and balance, a visual expression of the enlightened mind itself. By meditating upon this perfectly proportioned form, the practitioner's own mind begins to align with these qualities of harmony and stability. The Thangka becomes a mirror, reflecting back not the practitioner's current state of confusion, but their ultimate potential for Buddhahood. This is the first hidden message. The structure of the painting is a template for the structure of an awakened mind. Now, let's decipher the core symbols, starting with the most expressive features, the hands and the body. The gestures of the hands, known as mudras, are a silent language. The Bhumisparsha mudra, where the right hand touches the ground, is not just a depiction of the historical Buddha calling the earth to witness his enlightenment. For the meditator, it symbolizes the unwavering stability and unwavering commitment to truth, a reminder to remain grounded in reality during meditation. The dhyana mudra, with both hands resting in the lap, represents deep meditation and the union of method and wisdom. The body postures or asanas are equally coded. The common Vajra posture, with legs locked in a specific cross-legged position, represents an unshakable, diamond-like stability. The energetic posture of a dancing deity, with legs flung wide, symbolizes the dynamic activity of compassion radiating out into the world. Every pose is an embodiment of a spiritual quality to be cultivated. The symbolic objects or attributes held by the deities are a detailed glossary of Buddhist philosophy. A flaming sword, like that held by Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, does not represent physical violence but the sharp, discerning intelligence that cuts through the veil of ignorance and mistaken views. The lotus flower upon which many deities sit is not merely a beautiful seat. It symbolizes purity and the potential for enlightenment to blossom even from the muddiest, most impure circumstances of samsaric life. A skull cup filled with blood held by a wrathful deity is one of the most misunderstood symbols. It does not represent death or violence, but rather the transformation of the ego. The skull cup is the ego itself, the source of all suffering, and the blood is the nectar of immortal wisdom that fills it once the ego has been conquered and emptied. These objects are a visual shorthand for the entire path, from ignorance to awakening. Perhaps the most profound hidden messages are those not meant for open viewing at all. Some thankas, particularly those used in highest yoga tantra practices, are painted with a final, secret layer. Once the painting is complete, the back of the canvas is often inscribed with sacred Sanskrit mantras written in special ink. These are not for display. The practitioner will never see them. Their power is understood to permeate the cloth and infuse the image on the front with spiritual energy. Furthermore, the most crucial elements of certain meditation practices are never painted on the thanka itself. For instance, in a visualization of a deity like Vajrayogini, the intricate channels and energy drops within her body are intentionally left out. This is not an omission, it is a safeguard. This final, essential instruction is only given orally by a qualified guru to an initiated student. The thanka provides the visual framework, but the true, transformative key, the hidden message within the hidden message, is transmitted directly from master to disciple, preserving the integrity and power of a sacred, unbroken lineage that guides the practitioner all the way to the final goal of enlightenment. Deep in the high-altitude lakes and cloud forests of the Colombian Andes, pre-Columbian artisans performed what can only be described as alchemy. They mastered the art of lost wax casting, transforming the Earth's most inert and precious metal into objects of breathtaking ethereal lightness. To the Spanish conquistadors who first encountered them, the exquisite gold pendants and tunjos, small votive figures of the Muisca and Tarona cultures, were simply treasure to be melted down into coins. But we now understand that these were not mere wealth or decorations. They were sacred maps of the mind, intricate metal renderings of shamanic visions induced by sacred plants, encoding a hidden theology of transformation that was accessible only to the spiritual elite. The very process of creating these objects was a metaphor for the shamanic journey itself. The lost wax technique begins with a core of clay, which is then sculpted with beeswax into the desired form, a bat, an eagle, a human-animal hybrid. This wax model is then encased in more clay, creating a mold. When fired, the wax melts and is lost, drained away to leave a hollow space. Molten gold is then poured into this void, taking the form of the vanished wax. Once cooled, the clay mold is broken away, revealing the transformed golden figure within. This is a powerful physical allegory for the shaman's own experience, the destruction of the ordinary self, the clay mold, to reveal a purified spiritual essence, the golden figure, a rebirth through sacred fire. The object's creation was a ritual act, its manufacture mirroring the very metaphysical process it was designed to represent. When we examine these pieces, we see a recurring bestiary of potent animals, jaguars, bats, frogs, eagles, and serpents. To an outsider, these might be seen as simple nature worship or clan totems, but within the context of shamanic practice, each creature is a dense symbol representing a specific state of consciousness or spiritual power accessible through trance. The bat, a creature of the dark that navigates through a form of inner sight, symbolized the shaman's ability to traverse the darkness of the spirit world. The jaguar, the apex predator of the South American jungle, represented not just physical power but also the shaman's role as a psychopomp, a guide for souls between worlds, as the jaguar was believed to move between the forest floor and the spiritual underworld. By wearing a pendant in the form of these animals, the shaman wasn't just adorning himself, he was invoking and aligning himself with their specific spiritual attributes, preparing to take on their qualities during his visionary journey. This is where the hidden imagery becomes most fascinating. Many gold pendants feature what scholars call transformational or composite figures. A piece might appear at first glance to be a human figure. But upon closer inspection, the headdress is not a mere headdress. It is detailed with the unmistakable features of a bat, its wings forming a crest on either side of the head. The human ears might be elongated and stylized into the alert, swiveling ears of a jaguar. The figure's hands and feet could terminate in sharp, powerful claws. This is not a human wearing a mask. It is a literal depiction of a being in a state of metamorphosis, a visual representation of the shaman's soul actively merging with his animal spirit helper, or nagwul, during a trance state. The message was clear. The boundaries between human and animal, material and spiritual, were fluid and permeable. The shaman, through his rituals, could transcend these boundaries, and the goldwork was a permanent, wearable record of this ultimate spiritual achievement. The catalysts for these visions were powerful psychoactive plants, primarily Yopo anodinanthera seeds and ayahuasca brews, and the goldwork often contains subtle references to this process. Some figures are depicted with a characteristic snuffing tube or poporo used to inhale the hallucinogenic powder, but the references go deeper. The intricate, spiraling patterns and repetitive geometric designs that cover the surfaces of many pieces are now believed to be direct artistic interpretations of the visual phenomena experienced during trance. The geometric patterns, spirals, and pulsating fields of light known as phosphenes that are common to altered states of consciousness. By rendering these subjective visions in solid gold, the shaman artist was making the invisible visible, externalizing his inner experience for others in his tradition to recognize and understand. A specific pattern of dots and lines might not just be decoration. It could be a signature of a particular type of visionary experience, a shared visual language for those who had also journeyed into that realm. The ultimate purpose of this encoded art was twofold. For the shaman, it was a powerful talisman, a physical anchor that helped him navigate the terrifying and disorienting landscapes of the spirit world. Focusing on the imagery of his pendant feeling the cool metal against his skin could provide a point of stability and intention during his voyage. For the wider community, these objects were proof of the shaman's power and his connection to the forces that governed their world. When he emerged from his ritual seclusion wearing a golden Batman pectoral, he was not just a man in a costume. He was living proof that transformation was possible, that the spirit world was real, and that he could travel there to negotiate for healing, rain, and abundance. The gold itself, with its sun-like brilliance, was the perfect medium for this message, a material embodiment of the sacred, eternal, and transformative power he claimed to channel, a hidden map of the mind's journey rendered in the most immutable substance his culture could conceive. Imagine the roar of 15,000 voices echoing through the open-air theater of Dionysus in Athens, the air electric with anticipation. Onto the stage steps an actor, his identity completely obliterated by a molded mask of linen, cork, or wood. To us, this might seem like a primitive special effect, a simple way for one actor to play multiple roles. But for the Athenian citizen, that mask was a sophisticated data stream, instantly communicating a universe of information about the character's social status, moral compass, and even the playwright's own sly commentary on the politics of the day. These masks were not blank slates. They were cunningly crafted filters, amplifying the human voice into a powerful instrument of social critique. Their exaggerated features and specific colors forming a silent language every member of the audience was trained to read. The most immediate code was in the mask's physical construction and its stark division between the two primary genres. In the rollicking, often vulgar comedies of Aristophanes, the masks were grotesque, absurd, and deliberately ugly. Characters were caricatures. Politicians were given obscenely large, gaping red mouths, symbolizing their empty, blustering speeches. Old misers had pinched, greedy features and stringy hair. Even the great god Heracles might appear with a mask featuring a distended belly and a stupid, grinning face, reducing a mythical hero to a gluttonous fool. This exaggeration was the essence of the humor, but it was also the vehicle for the satire. By distorting the features of a well-known public figure, and everyone in the audience would know exactly who was being lampooned, the playwright could mock their vanity, their stupidity, or their policies with impunity. The mask provided a thin veil of deniability. It was just a character in a play, after all, even if its likeness was unmistakable. Tragedy, by contrast, used masks to achieve a different, more profound effect. Instead of caricature, these masks presented idealized, often sorrowful and noble faces. Their features were symmetrical and beautiful, even in their anguish, with mouths permanently fixed in a small, round opening that functioned as a built-in megaphone, projecting the actor's voice to the very back rows. This was a crucial part of the hidden message. The mask transformed the individual actor into a universal type: the fallen king, the grieving mother, the avenging hero. It stripped away the particular and elevated the character to a symbolic level, allowing the audience to focus on the moral and philosophical dilemmas being presented. The mask's fixed, intense expression of pathos or terror created a constant, powerful emotional anchor for the entire performance, a silent witness to the unfolding disaster that helped guide the audience's collective emotional response. Color symbolism on these masks provided another immediate layer of coding. While the pigments themselves have faded from the archaeological record, descriptions in the plays themselves give us strong clues. A dark complexion or deeply tanned skin on a mask typically indicated a male character who spent his time outdoors, often a farmer, a soldier, or a servant, a man of action, not leisure. A pale, white face, on the other hand, was the mark of a woman or an effeminate man of the upper classes who remained sheltered indoors. A bright red face could signify a drunkard or a man in the grip of uncontrollable passion. The audience, attuned to these visual cues, could make instantaneous judgments about a character the moment they stepped onto the orchestra. The playwright could then use these preconceptions, either confirming them or subverting them for dramatic effect, playing a sophisticated game with the audience's expectations based solely on the palette of the mask. Perhaps the most ingenious hidden message was the mask's ability to facilitate radical shifts in perspective, a function mastered by the playwright Euripides. In his later plays, he often had characters turn their masks to the side or even briefly remove them at a moment of extreme emotional crisis. In a society where public reputation and honor were everything, this symbolic unmasking represented a shocking moment of raw, private truth breaking through the public facade. It was a visual cue that the character was revealing their authentic self, stripped of all social pretension. For the audience, this created a powerful intimacy with the character, a breach of the theatrical fourth wall that asked them to empathize with the individual behind the archetype. It was a daring theatrical technique that used the mask's presence to make its absence utterly devastating, commenting on the very nature of identity and the masks we all wear in society. Ultimately, the Greek theater mask was a democratic instrument. In a society where public debate was the lifeblood of the state, the theater was an extension of the assembly. The masks ensured that every citizen, from the front row aristocrat to the back row farmer, received the same clear visual information. They leveled the playing field, allowing complex social and political ideas to be communicated with immediate, visceral power. They gave the playwright a protected voice to challenge authority, to question social norms, and to explore the deepest questions of human existence. The next time you see a representation of those familiar twin masks of comedy and tragedy, remember they are not just symbols of the theater. They are remnants of a lost visual language, a powerful tool that turned a performance into a public dialogue, using carved features and painted colors to hold a mirror up to an entire civilization, reflecting its follies, its fears, and its deepest aspirations back upon itself. But to truly grasp the genius of this encoded architecture, we must venture deeper beyond the public antechambers and into the most sacred, hidden part of the tomb, the burial chamber itself. This innermost sanctum was not a static room but a dynamic, spiritual mechanism. Its walls were often covered with the Amduat, the Book of What Is in the Underworld, which detailed the sun god Ra's perilous 12-hour journey through the darkness each night. This was not mere decoration, it was a crucial guide. The journey of the deceased pharaoh's soul was believed to mirror Ra's voyage. By having this text in the chamber, the tomb's architects were providing the king with a literal roadmap for his own perilous trek, a sequence of challenges, allies, and enemies he would face, all mapped out hour by hour on the walls around his sarcophagus. The chamber's orientation was also critical, often aligned with the circumpolar stars, the so-called indestructibles that never set, symbolizing the king's desired eternal, unchanging existence in the afterlife. Perhaps the most fascinating architectural trick was the use of the so-called false door. Found in tombs from the earliest dynasties onward, this was a solid, beautifully carved stela that mimicked a real doorway. To a casual observer, it might seem like a decorative element or even a builder's mistake, but its purpose was profoundly symbolic. The Egyptians believed the ka, or life force, of the deceased continued to reside in the tomb. The false door was a magical conduit, a permeable barrier between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. Through rituals and offerings performed at this false door by priests and family members, the essence of the food, drink, and incense could pass through to nourish the ka eternally. It was a hidden message of connection, a promise that the deceased would not be forgotten and would remain a part of the community's cycle of life, even from beyond the veil. This system of hidden meaning reached its zenith with the use of cryptographic writing, a practice where standard hieroglyphs were replaced with complex, often bizarre, symbolic substitutions. In the tomb of Ramesses IX, for instance, the name of the underworld serpent god Apep, the great enemy of Ra, is not written with its usual signs. Instead, the scribes used a hieroglyph of a mongoose, the natural enemy of the snake, shown in the act of decapitating the serpent. This was a powerful act of sympathetic magic. By writing the name of the enemy with the symbol of its own destruction, they were actively neutralizing its threat, preventing the chaotic Apep from ever manifesting to harm the king's soul on its journey. The writing itself became a protective spell, its true meaning and power visible only to the gods who could read this esoteric code. The tomb, therefore, was far more than a final resting place. It was a customized, magically fortified vehicle, its every dimension, decoration, and inscription a precisely engineered component designed for one ultimate, hidden purpose: to safely propel the soul of the pharaoh from the world of the dead into the company of the eternal gods. Now we descend into the dusty, sun-baked soil of everyday life in ancient Mesopotamia, where fear of the supernatural was as constant as the heat. In the shadows of the great ziggurats and bustling city-states, ordinary people lived in constant dread of invisible threats, demons, illness, and the evil eye. To combat these terrors, they developed one of the most personal and fascinating hidden message systems ever discovered: the Aramaic incantation bowl. These simple, everyday clay bowls, inverted and buried beneath the thresholds of homes, were not discarded trash. They were carefully engineered spiritual traps, their surfaces covered in a dizzying spiral of text and images that formed a potent, hidden defensive magic designed to protect the household from all that went bump in the night. The magic of these bowls was in their specific, deliberate design. A typical family would commission a scribe or a local magician to inscribe the inside of a common bowl with a powerful spell, written in Aramaic, the lingua franca of the region. But the text wasn't written in neat, parallel lines. It was inscribed in a continuous, tightly wound spiral that started from the rim and coiled relentlessly inwards towards the center. This wasn't just a space-saving technique, it was a crucial part of the enchantment. The spiral was believed to act as a vortex, a whirlpool of magical energy designed to confuse, ensnare, and ultimately imprison any malevolent spirit that attempted to cross the home's threshold. The demon, drawn in by the text, would be forced to follow the path of the spiral, reading the spell against its will until it was sucked irrevocably into the center of the bowl, where its power would be neutralized forever. The text itself was a legally binding contract with the supernatural world. Most spells followed a precise formula, beginning by naming the specific demons they were meant to capture. Fiendish entities like Lilith, the winged female demon who threatened mothers and newborns, or the shadowy Shedim that brought sickness and misfortune. The spell would then invoke the names of powerful angels or deities, calling upon them to enforce the agreement. The core of the text was a direct, commanding injunction, often written in the first person as if the demon itself was speaking. I, the demon so and so, hereby bind and swear that I will not enter this house, nor will I harm its inhabitants. This was a brilliant piece of magical thinking. By forcing the demon to essentially confess and surrender through the written word, the spell robbed it of its power, turning its own malevolent intent into a weapon against itself. But the hidden message didn't stop with words. The true genius of these devices lay in the fusion of text and image. At the very center of the spiral, where the demon was ultimately trapped, the scribe would often draw a picture of the very entity the spell was meant to capture. This image was not a detailed portrait but a symbolic rendering, a crudely drawn, bound figure, often with its hands tied behind its back and chains radiating from its body. Some depictions show the demon with its eyes pierced or its mouth gagged, visually silencing and blinding it. This drawing was the final, critical step in the magical process. In the ancient Mesopotamian worldview, to represent something was to have power over it. By drawing the demon in a state of captivity at the epicenter of the spell, the magician was not just describing its imprisonment, he was actively causing it, using the image as a supernatural anchor to hold the spirit fast for all eternity. These bowls were then strategically placed in the most vulnerable points of the home, beneath the threshold, under the corners of the foundation, or in the courtyard. The threshold was seen as a liminal space, a boundary between the safe, ordered world of the household and the chaotic, dangerous world outside. It was the prime entry point for spiritual pests. By burying the bowl face down, the household was effectively creating a magical landmine. Any demon attempting to cross that boundary would be instantly snared by the inverted vortex of the spell, captured and neutralized before it could take a single step inside. This transformed an ordinary household object into a permanent, silent guardian, a hidden message of protection that worked tirelessly underground, allowing the family living above to sleep in peace, safeguarded by a powerful covenant written in clay. Now we set sail from the protected harbors of the ancient world and venture into the vast, open expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where a civilization developed a hidden language of wayfinding so ingenious it defies belief. To the untrained eye, the objects created by the navigators of the Marshall Islands look like little more than abstract, fragile artworks, a random assortment of sticks tied together with cord, punctuated by a few small shells. Early European explorers, unable to decipher their meaning, often dismissed them as primitive curiosities or children's toys. But we now understand that these so-called stick charts are, in fact, some of the most sophisticated and elegant maritime maps ever created, encoding the entire Pacific seascape into a portable, three-dimensional format that guided voyagers across thousands of miles of open water without a single written word. The genius of these charts lies in their profound understanding of the ocean not as an empty void, but as a dynamic, living entity full of information. Marshallese navigators, known as Mitos, realized that the key to navigation wasn't just the stars overhead, but the patterns of energy moving through the water itself. They learned to read the ocean's subtle language of swells and currents. A stick chart is not a map of the land, it is a hydrodynamic diagram. The straight and curved sticks made from the midribs of palm fronds do not represent sailing routes between islands. Instead, they represent the refraction patterns of ocean swells, the way these powerful, deep water waves bend and interact as they encounter the invisible presence of an atoll or a chain of islands lurking just below the horizon. Let's decode the basic elements. The small cowrie shells tied at the intersections of the sticks represent the islands themselves, but the true focus is on the pathways created by the sticks. There are three main types of patterns on a complete chart. The rebelib is a general-purpose chart covering a large section of an island chain, showing the relative positions of many atolls. The matang is a more abstract educational chart, used to teach students the fundamental principles of swell interaction without referencing real islands. The most important type for active navigation is the meadow. This chart zooms in on a specific group of islands and shows the precise behavior of the swells around them with incredible accuracy, detailing how they deflect, refract, and create interference patterns that a skilled navigator could feel through the hull of his canoe. The process of using this hidden knowledge was a full-body experience. A navigator would memorize the chart before a voyage, internalizing the complex web of swell patterns. Then at sea, he would lie down in the canoe and physically feel the vessel's motion. He would discern the dominant, deep ocean swells rolling in from the east. He would then identify the secondary, reflected waves bouncing back from an unseen island, and the shorter, steeper waves created where different swells met and interfered with each other. By correlating the specific sensations he felt through his skin and inner ear with the mental map from the stick chart, he could pinpoint his location with astonishing precision. He wasn't just following a path, he was listening to a conversation between the ocean and the land, interpreting a symphony of waves that was completely invisible to the European sailors who relied solely on compasses and astrolabes. This system represents a hidden message of unparalleled environmental intimacy. It required a lifetime of study and a cultural commitment to preserving this complex, unwritten knowledge through rigorous apprenticeship. The charts themselves were not typically taken on voyages. They were mnemonic devices, physical repositories of a sacred science that was committed to memory. They encoded not only spatial data, but also generations of accumulated observational wisdom about seasonal currents, the habits of migratory birds that could indicate the direction of land, and the specific look of clouds that form over lagoons. Each chart was a masterpiece of information design, a hidden map that revealed the soul of the sea itself, allowing a handful of extraordinary mariners to conquer the planet's largest ocean using nothing but wisdom, memory, and a profound connection to the hidden rhythms of the natural world. Now we enter the most secretive and misunderstood laboratory of all, a world where art, science, and mysticism fuse into a single, dazzling, and deliberately deceptive practice. Medieval and Renaissance alchemical texts are filled with some of the most bizarre and captivating images ever created. Wolves devouring the sun, winged serpents, kings and queens dissolving in baths, and dragons eating their own tails. To the untrained eye, these woodcuts and engravings look like the ravings of madmen or fantastical allegories. But for the initiated alchemist, they were nothing less than precise, encrypted laboratory manuals and detailed maps of the soul's journey toward perfection. This was a world where to reveal the secrets outright was considered a profound sin. So artists and adepts developed a complex visual language of symbols, colors, and sequences, a hidden message system designed to protect its powerful truths from the unworthy while guiding the diligent seeker toward both physical and spiritual gold. Let's begin by decoding the most common stage of the process, often represented by a stunning image, the death and resurrection of the royal couple. A typical illustration might show a king in red and a queen in white lying dead in a sealed glass coffin, often with a stream of blood connecting them. From their bodies, a single, dual-natured figure emerges, sometimes with two heads or a single, androgynous form. On a purely chemical level, this is a precise description of a specific laboratory procedure. The Red King often represents raw, unrefined gold or the mineral cinnabar, a source of mercury. The White Queen symbolizes purified silver or another volatile substance. Their death in the coffin, which is the alchemical flask or alembic, represents a process of dissolution in a powerful acid, breaking them down to their essential components. Their resurrection as a single new entity is the creation of a new, purified compound, a crucial step toward the ultimate goal. But the hidden message operates on a far more profound spiritual level simultaneously. This is the core of alchemical duality. The king and queen represent the opposing principles within the human soul and the cosmos: sulfur and mercury, spirit and soul, conscious and unconscious, active and passive. Their union, the conjunctio, is not a physical marriage but the arduous psychological process of reconciling these inner opposites. The death in the coffin is the necessary ego death, the dissolution of the old, rigid personality in the vessel of introspection and meditation. The emergence of the abyss, the two-headed being, symbolizes the achievement of inner wholeness, a state of psychological and spiritual balance where one is no longer ruled by conflict but has integrated all aspects of the self. The same image, therefore, holds two sets of instructions, one for the laboratory bench and one for the soul. Color sequences in these illustrations provide another meticulous layer of encryption. The great work, the magnum opus, was famously described as passing through four key color stages: blackening, whitening, yellowing, and reddening. An adept would follow these color changes in his flask like a roadmap. The initial negrido, or blackening, is almost universally illustrated with images of decay, a crow, a black sun, or a burial. This represents the initial putrefaction, the reduction of matter to its black, chaotic primal state. But spiritually, it is the dreaded dark night of the soul, a period of despair, confusion, and confronting one's own shadow. The next stage, the albedo or whitening, is shown with images of washing, a white rose, a swan, or a resurrected queen. In the lab, this is the purification and washing of the material. For the soul, it is the dawn of clarity, enlightenment, and the purification of intention. The final stages, citronitas and rubedo, the yellowing and reddening, are depicted with the rising of a golden dawn and the appearance of the Red King in all his power, often holding a glowing red stone. Chemically, this is the successful production of the Philosopher's Stone, the legendary agent of transformation. Spiritually, it is the ultimate achievement, the birth of the true self, radiant, enlightened, and capable of transforming base human nature into its highest, most perfected state. An alchemist would use these color codes to track his progress in both realms, the external experiment providing a mirror for his internal transformation. The hidden message was that the work on the metal and the work on the self were one and the same. To succeed in the laboratory, you had to first purify your own heart. Perhaps the most ingenious encryption is found in the visual puzzles and recurring symbolic animals. The Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, is a classic symbol of eternity and cycles, but in alchemy, it specifically represents the circular, self-sustaining nature of the work and the process of distillation, where a substance is vaporized and condensed back into liquid in a continuous cycle. The green lion devouring the sun is not a mythical monster but a vivid description of a dangerous chemical reaction, often involving aqua regia, a potent mixture of acids that can dissolve even noble gold, appearing greenish-yellow as it does so. The winged and wingless dragons in combat symbolize the volatile and fixed states of matter, their struggle representing the heating and cooling processes required to achieve balance. These images were a protective measure, a way to publish dangerous knowledge without it falling into the wrong hands. A text filled with straightforward chemical recipes might be used by greedy charlatans to create counterfeit coin or poison rivals. But a text filled with enigmatic pictures of dragons and dying kings would only be pursued by those with the patience, intelligence, and moral character to seek its deeper meaning. The art was a filter, ensuring that the secrets of transformation, both of metal and of spirit, would only be revealed to those who had undertaken the long, difficult journey of deciphering the code, a journey that itself was the first and most important step in the alchemist's own transformation. And so our journey ends, a voyage that has taken us from the torch-lit caves of our earliest ancestors to the silent, star-aligned temples of the Maya, from the secret Christian symbols in Roman villas to the infinite geometric whispers of Islamic art. We have unraveled the threads of 30 hidden messages, yet this is merely a glimpse into a vast and sprawling tapestry of human ingenuity. What unites the Minoan priestess holding her serpents, the Viking carver encoding a secret in branch runes, and the alchemist depicting the death of a king? It is a shared, profound impulse to communicate something that could not be said aloud, to preserve sacred knowledge from suppression, to convey dangerous political critiques without reprisal, and to map the invisible realms of the spirit and the stars for those with the eyes to see. This incredible diversity of methods, from the hydrodynamic stick charts of the Marshall Islands to the color-coded theology of Byzantine icons, reveals one undeniable truth: ancient cultures were not primitive. They were sophisticated, nuanced, and intellectually vibrant. Their artistry was not merely decorative, it was functional, philosophical, and deeply purposeful. They possessed advanced understandings of astronomy, mathematics, and psychology, and they chose to encode this wisdom not in brittle books that could burn, but in the most durable mediums they could conceive: stone, metal, pigment, and clay. They built their secrets into the very foundations of their world, ensuring that their most cherished truths would endure, waiting for a future generation equipped with the curiosity and the tools to listen. These hidden messages show us that the drive to connect with the divine, with the cosmos, and with each other across the barriers of time is a fundamental part of the human experience. The Celtic monk tying his endless knot was meditating on eternity, just as the Egyptian scribe was ensuring his pharaoh's eternal life through a cryptographic spell. The Olmec sculptor was carving a king's divine right into his helmet, while the Persian miniaturist was sketching a treasonous allegory in the pattern of a courtier's robe. Each act was a testament to the belief that art is the most potent vessel for the ideas that matter most. This exploration leaves us with a thrilling invitation and a profound responsibility. The next time you stand before an ancient artifact in a museum, or gaze up at the weathered facade of a centuries-old cathedral, do not just see an object or a building. Look closer, question the familiar, wonder about the choice of a color, the repetition of a pattern, the slight anomaly in a figure's gesture. Ask what story is being told just beneath the surface, waiting for its key to be found. For every message we have decoded, countless others remain locked away, their languages forgotten, their meanings shimmering just beyond our grasp. They are silent puzzles patiently awaiting the right pair of eyes, the curious mind, the breakthrough in technology that will finally allow them to speak again. The greatest secret of ancient art may be that its conversation with us is far from over. It has only just